Hi, how are you? It's the Jeff Gerstmann Show. It's a podcast about video games, and it is April 28th, 2026. We're here. We're ready to discuss video games and all of the other stuff that goes with that, I suppose. It's we're getting some decent and like interesting kind of new releases lately, which has been kind of nice. We're also on the cusp of the release of Valve's Steam controller, which they decided to ship ahead of the Steam machines because, well, otherwise they have to pay a bunch of warehouse fees on storing them if they decide to wait until Steam machines are actually ready. You know what I'm saying? Hey, shit happens, as they say. I'm interested in the Steam controller. I should really email Valve. Say, hey, I would be interested in covering this stuff. In fact, I do cover this stuff. But I didn't. There you go. I think the main thing I'm curious about that I haven't necessarily seen in any of the Steam controller coverage that landed, I guess, yesterday, barring, someone breaking embargo and fucking the whole thing up, is the quality of the D-pad. Over the time that I spent with a Steam Deck, which I don't use the actual Steam Deck as often anymore. I use the ROG Ally X a little bit more frequently, but I'm not using either of them all that often at the moment. I want to know if the D-pad is better than the Steam Deck D-pad, because the Steam Deck D-pad is not awesome, like long term. Like that's kind of after a long time using a Steam Deck, my feeling was like, this just doesn't seem like an awesome, like for certain styles of games, you're going to care about that, right? I always go to fighting games. That is the first thing when I pick up a controller is I fuck with the D-pad and think about throwing fireballs with it, and I think about doing dragon punches with it and how that might feel. And that's an act of touching the D-pad and the buttons and trying to decide, like, is this feeling? I don't know. The Steam Deck D-pad is functional. I don't think it's awesome for fighting games. Some of that is also like the button placement on the Steam Deck. They really tried to make it as small as they could in the confines of the controls they had to put on it. And so like the B button on that Steam Deck is hanging off the side a little bit. It is all the way kind of on an edge there. And it's, like sometimes that stuff doesn't always feel awesome. It's the sort of thing that kind of reveals itself after, dozens and dozens of hours of playing games on it, especially emulating old games. Like that's sort of the other thing. I had a good reminder of a big part of why I hate the Switch Pro controllers. Speaking of playing old video games, so I've moved all my gear out here to the garage, and so if I want to use a computer, I have to come out to the garage, and sometimes that's a hassle. Like kids are kids, and they're like I take a step towards the garage, and a baby starts crying, things like that. And so, there are times when I just kind of need to stay in the house. And so I have my laptop set up in there. And I decided at some point, like, I'm going to set this laptop up so it can, so I have like emulator stuff installed on it. Like I got all these games on the network already. It should be pretty easy. And I set it all up. And then I realized like I need a controller. Like I need to find a Bluetooth controller that I can hook up to this Mac that I'm not using for anything else. And I started digging around and found my Switch 1 Pro controller. And I wired it up and started playing, and was immediately reminded by how terrible the D-pad is on that for accidentally hitting diagonals. It's like a criminal act. It just got me, like, it was a good reminder all over again that, like, every time people say, like, oh, the Pro controller is so awesome, it's like, you people are crazy. You're on angel dust. You have no concept of what makes a good D-pad if you are using the Switch 1 Pro controller. The Switch 2 Pro controller, which I have sitting right here, not actually that much better. It is a little bit better. It does not rock around quite as funkily, which is that's the technical term. as the Switch 1 Pro controller, but it is still not awesome. I ended up digging up my old, what is it? It's like the 8-bit SN30, whatever, the SNES controller that has analog sticks on it. The Pro version, like it looks like a little Super Nintendo controller, except it's got analog sticks and it's got 4 shoulder buttons, and so it's like everything a modern controller would want. And I ended up hooking that up to it, and I was like, yes, now we're in business. That's a good controller for playing old video games. And everything was fine after that. I was able to get back to playing Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, which I have not had that much time to play. Like, I still want to finish that game, but I am still on the boss fight with death, because all of these other video games keep coming in. The kids have continued to play Tomodachi Life, and I think my daughter has made every single person she knows. So it's a good checklist of like, who are the people that are in my daughter's life? And it's like, okay, there's like a few kids at school here. There's the person we have come and watch the kids sometimes. She's in there, and I think some of her daughters are in there, and some other, just a handful of people. You look at it and go like, okay, good. All right, this is no one weird in here. Tomodachi Life is a game I really want to play, and I haven't had time because they've been playing it and I've been playing other stuff. And so I've been kind of living vicariously through them as they kind of build out their cities. My son has his own city and is making his own characters and everything, and it's been really fun to watch them do their stuff. And then is that game good, or is that game 3 or 4 cutscenes that are really funny if you write dirty words into certain text fields? Because if you believe social media and the way that game is represented there, the way that game is represented online is just like it's the cutscene of 2 people meeting each other and becoming friends, and then someone has written hardcore fisting into the slot. It's like, do you want to talk about boing hardcore fisting? And then the other person goes, I thought you would never ask. I love hardcore fisting. And it's just kind of, I don't know. It's Nintendo Mii's talking about how they're way into sounding, which is like, that's fine. Like, hey, I guess that's not for me, but I appreciate that, people have hobbies. And it's a lot of that. It's a whole lot of that online. That is that is 95% of people talking about Tomodachi Life online is just like, I made RuPaul, and here she is talking to Guy Fieri about how much she likes to fucking destroy the twinks. Like whatever, right? It's like it's people typing rude words into a thing and giggling about it, and I'm all for it. Don't make no mistake. It's awesome. But at times it seems a little thin. And I wonder about the longevity of this thing, because it feels like it's going to be like a handful of, like, oh, yeah, yes, you could make Spock and Data fall in love. Finally, a new type of slash fiction. Like no one has written slash about Spock and Data. Come on. I'm all for it, and I want to spend more time with it, but I'm still not a good. The art part of it kind of puts me off a little bit. I've the part where I'm not good at making character creators or whatever. But for in our household, it has been less about disgusting, or not to kink shame, but like it's been less about like filthy. I want to know, can I hold it? Like whatever, like that sort of stuff. And it's been more about like, my daughter has created all of these characters and has not set the familial relationships properly. And so like people are having crushes on each other and getting married and all this other stuff. And she's like running around, oh, they got a crush on each other and they're getting married. Ah! And that's been interesting to hear about. I love that game. I love that they made another one of those. It's fucking great. It's such a good, weird thing. and I think it's actually been really entertaining for the kids, and it's because it does have this sort of free form feel to it, you know? Like, yes, it has some gameplay. Like, yes, in theory, you're earning money to buy things and you're leveling up your island so you can put more people on, you know. But like the requirements on that are relatively low in a way that, like, if you just want to fuck around and do a thing, you can, and people are doing that, and it just seems like a very good low stakes kind of time, and you know, all of the possibilities with art and everything, and you know, like people that are playing the game on filthy hardware are like importing pings to it and modding it and doing stuff like that. But and I think that's why everyone has a pack of Newports. That's why so many of the videos online that I was seeing for a while there were just like, check it out, I made it so that they really like cigarettes. You know, like, yeah, all right, sure. That was funny the first 4 times I saw that, and then you're like, that's the Newports. It sure is. Great. Babies love these menthol cigarettes. That's why they had to ban them. Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back, and we'll talk about... let me look here. Video games? I'm seeing video games. Meat. Good Chop delivers high-quality American meat and seafood straight to your door. Vacuum sealed, frozen at peak freshness, so your freezer stays stocked with meat. You cook it when you want it, and you never have to gamble on that grocery store quality ever again. That's right. Good Chop will send you meat, and they have so many different cuts and styles and everything. They got beef. They've got poultry. They've got pork. They've got seafood. And even more. You're looking for ground bison? Guess what? They've got it. They got Gulf shrimp. They got baby back ribs, thick cut uncured bacon, breaded chicken strips, top sirloin steaks, ground sirloin flank steaks, American Wagyu ground beef, and so much more that you can choose from when you are building your box of meat. Get a meat box in the mail from American Farms and Fisheries. By choosing Good Chop, you support local family farms and independent ranchers right here in the U.S. So get that meat. Go to goodchop.com/podcast and use the code 50Jeff to get $50 off plus free shipping on your first order. That's $50 off plus free shipping at goodchop.com/podcast. And the offer code is 50Jeff. Meat! All right, so Saros is just about out here. Or I guess it's out now? Is that the thing? They did a... I didn't realize they were doing this, but they did a pre-order the version and get it 48 hours early thing. And so I believe that game is available to those players now, and it will be available for everyone else in a couple of days? Either way, check your local listings. It's out this week. Saros is the follow-up to Returnal. It is Housemarque's new game. There is a video up on YouTube that I recorded last night of almost 2 hours of me playing through the entire first area. If you want to get a look at that game and kind of the story beats and how the general flow of that game is built, the structure of it and such. It is very much Returnal in most of the ways that matter. But I feel like they, in their quest to kind of make the game a little bit more friendly and more finishable by a larger percentage of the audience, which we'll see how that goes. I feel like they have removed some of the things that made Returnal a cool video game, and what we're left with is I feel like it's a video game that, like, from a gameplay perspective, is incredibly similar. Big enemies shooting big crazy bullet patterns at you. You have options to deal with those. You can absorb the bullets to charge a power weapon. You can You eventually get a parry, so you can parry certain types of bullets. It's very color-coded. They did a great job on the accessibility front with letting you set all of the different types of bullets to a wide range of colors. And so if they did not do that, this would be a 5-minute conversation of, yeah, I can't play Saros, fucking whatever. But they did a good job on that front. And so, because there are some bullets that you can't even like dash through, that you're just like, okay, you need to completely avoid these. And honestly, the rules for which bullets are which are sometimes hard to keep track of. And so basically anything that isn't the blue absorbable bullet, I'm just trying to dodge anyway. Some of them you can pull up your shield and still at least block the damage, but I'm either dashing through everything or not or whatever. But it is Returnal in most of the ways that matter. With a big long skill tree, so much of the stuff on the skill tree is just like a +1 to this, a +1 to that. There's not that much in the way of like, oh, here's a cool new feature that like, oh, this is actually like a skill that I care about. It's more like feature unlocks. Like there are things that are on there that'll be like, oh, your second wind or whatever. So if you get killed, you will come back a second time and you will not have full health, but there are later skills that will make it so you come back with more of your health than you did normally. And also there are what they call nightmare strands in the world, which are difficult little combat boxes that are optional. And if you go in there and finish them, you will recharge your second wind. So if you're like deep into a run and you've already died once and you need to get that back, you can get it back. All of this stuff kind of adds up to a game that feels like much lower stakes than Returnal is. The boss fights and design. I'll stop here and say the boss fights and design that I've seen in my 9.5, 10 hours with the game, which is not the entire game. I've heard numbers ranging from 12 to 18 hours. I am getting near, narratively, I'm getting near like the thing that you've been looking for the entire game feels like it's right around the corner. But also the trophies have trophies for things like complete Act 2 and complete Act 3. My feelings on that are, not knowing what those are, my feelings on that are like that is either some kind of new game plus, or that Act 2 and Act 3 are not nearly as long as Act 1. From looking at the trophies and looking at the number of boss fight trophies that are left and some of that other stuff is just like, okay. So I feel like I've seen most of the game, but certainly not all of the game, just so we're clear. I found myself at a point here where I have reached what is seemingly the boss fight that would be the end of this act or the end of this narrative arc that we're currently on, and it would have to pivot into something else after this because we're just about out of story, and so it would need to gin up some new story. I am feeling no pull from this game at all. Run-based games, you want that feeling of like, oh, next time I'm going to get it, next time I'll pull this. I am having the opposite here. It's a game where the runs are typically around half an hour. You know, if you're making your way through one entire biome, one entire level, you know, that's usually somewhere around 30 minutes. And I'm finding at the end of like there've been, you know, in the week or so that I've had access to the game, there's definitely been like I'll have a run, and win or lose, I'll just be like, yeah, okay, and I will turn it off and do something else. Like it's not a game that's making me go like, I gotta get back in there and I gotta see this. I need to know what happens next, or like I know I can beat that boss next time. Like it's just not having any. It just feels very flat to me, overall. And the boss fights are, I'm gonna say, significantly easier. At least the stuff that I've seen so far compared to the difficulty of Returnal, in a way that makes them very underwhelming. And I just, again, like on the gameplay end of things, it's just, you're just jumping in you're just moving in a box. You jump up, dash over the bullets, land, they target you here, you slowly walk back the other way to dodge those bullets, then they shoot out another weird stream, you jump up, you dash over, and it's that. And it's that. Really, obviously in some combat arenas you're getting attacked by 4 different enemies at once, and someone's getting behind you, and there's a little bit more to it than that. But in a lot of the boss fights, it's just like read the attacks that are coming in and go like, okay, do this when that happens, do this when that happens, do this, and keep shooting all the while. Like Returnal, a lot of the boss fights have these kind of 3 health bar, 3 phase kind of thing, but it just like you feel like you're whittling them down. The other thing that happens is like, and I talked about this a little when I was playing the game last night, so it's in the YouTube video. I don't really have the data to back this up, but I don't feel like I've gotten significantly better at this game as I've played it. If anything, dying in a run and doing it again makes it feel like the game is dumbing itself down a little bit to make sure that I finish it. I've had like boss attacks that I've had trouble dealing with that like the next time I got there that attack just didn't happen nearly as frequently, and so I was able to win, and just like situations like that where like because and part of that is you have a skill tree, and so you're leveling up, you're getting a longer ass health bar as you go, right? And that's obviously going to matter to some extent. You are the numbers behind the scenes are changing, but not in ways that you notice directly anyway. A lot of the skill tree is just like, okay, now this is +1 to this, and you're like, okay, that means I get more money for things I pick up. Oh, all right. And it's all this kind of like ephemeral, like if you just stared at it and really did the math on it, I'm sure you could figure it out, but like it doesn't really change the way your character feels from run to run. You don't feel like you're making any interesting choices on the skill tree. And so as a result, the difficulty just feels like it's less. It just feels like an easier game overall. Like when Returnal came out on the PlayStation 5, and this isn't necessarily a good thing. Like, like when Returnal came out on the PlayStation 5 and I first played it, I got fucking nowhere. That game is fucking brutal. Like, I think they're right to do this. I think they just went too far or did it in a way that I feels, Roarboy in the chat says condescending. It's maybe a little harsh, but like, yeah, kinda. A little bit. It feels like it's catering to me. Like, yeah, just finish it. Is sort of how the game feels. And Returnal did not do that. Returnal was just like, hey man, fuck you. You should get better at this game. You should become better at this game by banging your head against it. And that wasn't fun either. I eventually, so I played that game a fair amount on PlayStation 5 when it first came out, and I was impressed with it, but really got nowhere. And also like you couldn't save mid-run when that game first came out. And it was a very easy game to put down on PS5. It would come out on PC, like years later. And by that time, obviously, they had patched it a lot, and they had, kind of added some quality of life stuff to the game that made it a little more reasonable, while still being a very difficult video game. And that is where I played the game and finished it and did all that stuff and had a great time with it. It's not an easy game. It's fucked up. But I like the character. I like the story, all of that stuff. And here, I don't like the character. I don't like the story. They're kind of like cosmic horror type stuff. It is like with better voice acting out of all of the characters, I think that game would be, they would sell it better. But it's a lot of like madness. It's a lot of like people are going crazy. Like one of the first cutscenes in the game is you get back to base and there's a guy, he's wild eyed and he's like, I saw the shore and I did this thing and blah. But like the voice acting is not good enough to convey that in most of the characters, especially the ones that are subtly losing their minds over the course of the game. They just like the dialogue is written in such a way that that that's what's happening, but the performances are not where they need to be. And so that makes it, it's like that's another chance to hook players that I just that completely whiffed for me. There are people out there that seem to really like this game, and I like more power to them. I think that this game is fine. I don't know that there's too much I would say about it where it's like, this game's bad. I just think the choices they made make it a less interesting video game than Returnal was. And I think that's by design. Like all of the marketing, everything about it is like, die, come back, stronger, win. Like they're very much trying to write every piece of copy in such a way that like reminds you, like, you will get more powerful as you play this game. You will get permanent upgrades. This is a regular ass roguelite. You will get a currency that you spend on a skill tree to get more of this and more of this. Like, it feels like they're trying to signal that every chance they get. And again, so I think that the changes they made are by design. I just think that the way they come about their easier difficulty, I think, make the game a lot more boring than Returnal ever was. And I'm not a Returnal super fan. This is not, like, I'm not sitting there going like, hey, this game needs to be more hardcore. Like, no, man. I'm all for the idea of people should be able to finish games. Again, I just think the way they went about it is not very entertaining. And then you saddle that with the story and the characters and all this other stuff that I just think is dull. You're sort of left with a thing that, like, looks nice at times. I think there are aspects of it that are really interesting and neat to look at and what have you. I think a lot of the enemy design, it's a lot of just like, here's a bunch of enemies with very wavy tentacle-esque appendages, and so they're just like dashing around the universe, and it helps with visibility because there's so many particles flying out of everything all the time that sometimes you're not even sure what you're shooting at. You just see a life bar through the haze of bullets and particles, and you just go like, there's something over there I'm shooting. The vast majority of weapons have extremely copious auto aim, and so you don't really have to worry about that. You just kind of like aim in the general direction, hold down the trigger, and jump in a box until everything's dead. Yeah, that's Saros. There's some part of me that and I think this is just, I want to be sure, right? There's still some part of me that feels like I should finish this game. I will tell you, if there was no like job component to this, no like feeling of like I should finish this game, because that's the, if there was no, if I didn't have any compulsion around that, I would not play this game again. This would be the point where I would walk away from it, but there is still some kind of pull of just like, I do want to know so that I can talk about it a little bit more authoritatively. But I will tell you, I don't especially want to play any more of Saros, and I have gotten to the point where it is supposed to be sort of a peak and crescendo for the game's narrative points thus far, and I am incredibly willing to walk away from it. So I think that's a bummer. I don't know. Like, I think Returnal is a really cool game, and the idea of, hey, we're making more of that. I think that there's definitely like, I want that to be a great game. I want, like, hey, Housemarque's back with another video game. Like, that sounds like something I should be like, fuck yeah. But it is not worked out in that regard. Amazing controller, like haptic stuff, much like Returnal. I think that they are the best in the world at doing that stuff. And they do a lot of the same type of, like, they do a lot of GameCube shit with their triggers, again, where you kind of pull it halfway and the haptics make it stop, and that is how you get alt fire. If you pull the left trigger all the way, that's how you fire your power weapon. And a lot of that feels very natural. Like, if you haven't played the previous game, it'll take a little bit of getting used to, but it's awesome. Like, that stuff's really nice, to the point where, like, if you were trying to play that game without the haptics, that would be hard, because it's very specific in its mechanics about how you pull it part way for alt fire and pull it all the way for power. That would be weird. How did they handle that because Returnal on the PC, like, I played Returnal on the PC with a PS5 controller, so I got all of the haptics and everything and played it the way it was meant to be played. I don't actually know how they handle that. The idea of playing Returnal with a mouse and keyboard seems like a weird criminal act, but I guess at that point with a mouse and keyboard, you just that concept goes away and you just remap everything to buttons, because you have a zillion buttons at your disposal. But playing that game with a controller without the haptics seems like a really, like, that would be a weird experience. Anyway, Saros, it's I'm bummed out. Again, I like, this is a case where, like, I've read some of the very positive reviews of it, and I read those and go like, yeah, I think I get where you're coming from, but like, man, I could not have had a more different experience than this. But like sometimes you read a review and you go, these people are fucking, having played this game, these people are on fucking dust. This is stupid. What is wrong with you? These are reviews I read and went like, yeah, I see how it could break that way for some people, but it has not worked for me. What else is out? Kiln is out. This is the new game from Double Fine that just sort of popped up on a showcase video a while back. They said, hey, by the way, we're making another video game, and now Kiln is upon us. It's a 4v4 multiplayer game. It's not, I'm not going to call it a MOBA, but it is, you know, you are kind of working your way towards a base where you, and then you got to attack their base to put it out. Like there's no creeps, you know, or whatever. But it's a 4v4 multiplayer game where you play as a ghost that has possessed a piece of pottery. And you are trying to put out your opposing team's kiln by picking up water and bringing it to their base and then shoving the water into the fire to try to put out the fire of their kiln, and then you win. You make your own pottery in this. It's actually a pretty intuitive interface where you take the controller and you're moving these little ghost hands to move it out and in. And so, of course, people have made bongs. But depending on the size and shape that you make, it kind of puts it into one of like, I think it's like 7 different classes. And so, you know, if you make the pot a certain way, you will have a sword attack special. If you make it small, it'll be able to fit through little shortcuts in some of the levels to get to the opposing base faster, but you won't be able to hold as much water when you get there. You might not have as much health. And so as you are crafting it, it will tell you the trade-off between your pottery's health and carrying capacity. And it's a really neat idea. Playing it's fine. It's a really great idea. It's really fun to make the pottery. Going into the game and playing the game and using the pottery to try to put out the other kilns and working with random strangers to try and sensibly defend your kiln while attacking the other player's kiln. That's not as good. It's a really great idea that I think people will play for about another 90 days. And then you will eventually reach a point where it'll probably get pretty hard to find players to play with. But they do have a roadmap for it, so I don't know. Maybe as they put out updates, for it, it will, you know, like that will be something that people kind of latch onto in some way, shape, or form. But it is, yeah, it's a really neat idea. And the market for multiplayer games, especially ones that are outside of a small handful of genres and stuff, feels very broken right now in video games. Like, I don't think it's a good thing. That you know, experimental multiplayer only games are just, like, feel like such a weird risk. But it's a very small game, and it's a very neat little game. And it is worth at least taking a look at. You should go look at the mechanics of making pottery in the game. And as you level up, you get access to different decorations and things that will sometimes just be cosmetic, but it seems like you'll get access to like kind of more different options as you level and whatever, man. But it's a neat little thing. And I'm very curious to see what the lifespan of that game is. It's one of those games that you go like, it's nice that this is on Game Pass, because you could just, if you had Game Pass, you could just download it and look at it for a while and go, this is a cool thing, and not have to get caught up in all of the other bullshit around like, do I pay money for this game? If I pay money for this game, is it going to be around for another 90 days or 30? You know, like there's just a lot of those types of considerations, right? And so, you know, like that's sort of a frustrating reality that a game like Kiln has to exist in. The Diablo 4 expansion, Lord of Hatred, came out yesterday. Ripped from the headlines. This is a very me problem. This is an incredibly me problem that if you play Diablo 4 and you've played a lot of Diablo 4 and you're going to continue to play Diablo 4, this would never be a problem for you. But I tried to play, so I tried to play this when the review was coming out or a couple weeks ago. They sent it around stuff for review and just didn't have time to get to it. And so I didn't really touch much of it until yesterday. Well, whatever. I still have not touched much of it. Because I want to play with my characters. And when they sent stuff out, this specifically was like, oh, you're going to play it on a different server, and so you don't have your characters or your levels or anything like that, so create a new character and go in. Which is a very Diablo 4 thing to do because they have all this seasonal stuff, and so people are theoretically making new characters all the time in that goddamn game. That is not something that interests me. It just isn't. I've talked about that numerous times. I made my character. I like my character. I want to keep playing my character. I want there to be new content for my character to do. So the expansion coming out, well, hot damn. New content for my character to do. That's awesome. Loaded it up. And they have greatly expanded the skill trees in that game. And as such, they have refunded all skill points. And so I loaded it up and had no abilities and went and looked at it. And I was like, oh man, I have not played Diablo 4 in a really long time. I got this character exactly where I wanted it, one level at a time, spending these skill points along the way. When you not only give all those skill points back to me, but also you completely rework the skill tree, I am left looking at it and going like, what the fuck is any of this? Which basic attack did I use? I think it was the lunge. I think it was the one that dashes forward. I don't remember. I really liked it, but now I'm looking at 4 different options and I'm like, it's been so long that I've been away from this game that these 4 different options that are even like spending the very first skill point, I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I hit Alt F4 out of it. People have said the skill trees are an improvement, and I believe them, right? I'm sure that like it's deeper. It probably has more options and fun new abilities or whatever. But again, as someone who, you know, is not a like nonstop Diablo 4 fan and is not interested in making new characters, they essentially took my character away from me in a weird way of just like, yeah, I don't know. Now it has the same problem that all the seasonal characters do, and making new characters specifically for the expansion of here's a bunch of skill points, figure it out. And I think it's a terrible way to do things for people like myself who have not touched this game in a very long time. And so it's kind of created a similar problem to the one we talk about, Destiny 2. Of just like getting back in it and going like, I don't know what any of this shit means anymore. I don't know, like it's I've played fucking 300 games between now and the last time I played this one, and I don't remember any of the specifics about this. And what am I supposed to do? Like it would have been nice if they could have like tried to port the skill trees over, but it's like that's a lot of work, you know. Like they're obviously catering to people that are playing the game all the time, and I think that's probably how they're thinking about their fan base. But I wonder how many people bought that game, played the content, enjoyed it, stopped, and might still be willing to come back, because that is the boat that I am in. And it, for me personally, it has been an incredibly terrible experience that has made it so I just like literally like I had carved out a chunk of time last night to, it is why that Saros stream happened last night. Because I sat down to play some Diablo and got right on the server. Everyone was saying, oh, the servers are fucked or whatever. Like I managed to at least get on it and get logged in and connected and everything. And then was like, oh shit, I don't want to do this right now. I'm not sure that I want to do this ever, but I definitely don't want to sit here and like read tooltips for like 45 minutes to spend my 60 some odd skill points on this tree. And so I Alt F4'd out of that and did something else. I don't know how you solve that problem. This isn't, you know, like this is something of a criticism of the game, but I get it. right? I mean, they're right to make improvements to the skill tree. It sounds like the people that have been playing it really enjoy it. I feel very left out in the cold here. I feel very like, yeah, this is like you have iced me out of this game until I can find such time where I can sit down to play the game and then not play the game and instead stare at these numbers and go, okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. I am not going to go look up a fucking build guide because I'm not trying to play the meta, bro. Like, I don't give a shit about that. I spend my skill points 1 point at a time based on where I am in the game and what's available to me and where it feels like my character is deficient. Like a normal fucking person. I'm a normal fucking person. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And the idea that I would go look up like a build guide, like someone suggested, like, oh, there's a bunch of guides already. Like, fuck off. I'm not, like, that's so not what I want. It's super frustrating. And if that's how you're designing your game, then just, I don't know, like, take the skill tree out of it and then just have like 3 checkboxes that says, like, I want to be a tank, I want to be this, I want to be a that. Like, don't, you know, if you're going to rely on like build, like people, if the expectation is that you think a player is just going to look up a build guide and spend their points accordingly, take that out of the loop and just say, like, check a box, and as you level up, we will automatically in the background spend a point on this to put you in this direction. You know? It just seems it's frustrating. But again, it's a very fucking me problem, man. I don't like, this is not, I don't think this is normal. I don't think this is like the normal experience for people that are playing Diablo 4, but also I know I am not alone in terms of people who just want to play the content and play it when there is new content and are not here to like grind over and over again with seasonal characters and see how far I can get. Like, I know that is not just me. So I don't know, man. It's frustrating. That's a game that I was in the right frame of mind to be like, I could go for some more fucking Diablo 4 right about now, you know? And then loaded it up and was like, but not like this. No, thank you. And that was that. So we'll see, man. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about some news right after this. NordVPN. It's trusted by millions of internet users worldwide. And it offers a comprehensive solution for online security and privacy. Now, what is a VPN? Maybe you don't even know, you know? It can be kind of a weird thing if you've never used one before. Sometimes you want to look like you're coming from somewhere else. You know, whether that's for security reasons or whatever. And sometimes you need to encrypt your traffic because you want to stay safe. Why? You know, maybe you're at some hotel, or maybe you're at a coffee shop, or, you know, just places where you don't know if you can trust the security of the internet there. Nord encrypts all of that traffic. And you can also look like you're somewhere that you're not. So if you're looking to like, oh, okay, well, I need to, you know, connect to a server in the UK, and it says that, oh, this service is only available to people in the UK, you load up Nord and you say, all right, put me in the UK, and it'll put you in the UK. And then when you load up the site, it'll just work. It's fantastic. This can work the other way too. You travel and you're out of the country. You want to watch some video streaming stuff back home. Connect to a server back in your home country. And voila. You can watch your stuff. You can do your things, the things that you need to do. Nord makes it incredibly simple, and they've got servers all over the world to let you, you know, appear that you're coming from a variety of locations. So it's security, it's convenience, and Nord lets you stay logged in on 10 different devices. So this is something that the whole family could theoretically take advantage of. Avoid price discrimination too. Sometimes, you know, you're coming from a country and then the exchange rates are what they are, and like they're charging more in one region than another. A VPN like Nord can help you by changing that virtual location and getting you the best deal possible. You also get access to friendly 24/7 customer support. Nord's got it all. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/Jeff Gerstmann. That link will give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. And hey, there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box. Check it out. And now, the news. They aren't quite making the rounds, but, you know, in the wake of the Game Pass changes, Microsoft has conducted an interview with Game Files' Stephen Totillo. Asha Sharma and Matt Booty got out there to talk a little bit about kind of where they're at. It wasn't, necessarily the most revealing interview. I mean, they're not ready to talk turkey about a new console or kind of strategic directions beyond the stuff that they've already done. But kind of one of the interesting nuggets that came out of there is that they may, basically what I think the way they're signaling it, what I take from this is that everything's on the table. There's nothing about the current Xbox offering that is like set in stone. And that includes a lack of exclusivity, games on the PlayStation, for example. That's stuff that they are willing to at least consider, especially as they are about to go into a new generation of hardware and all of that. It's one of those, like, there's nothing to announce here, but if something changes, like this is they're kind of they're willing to do that. The quotes here are like, hey, we'll take a data-driven approach and a strategic-driven approach, and then we'll look at our principles and we'll make some calls. So we'll share more when we're ready. We know it's an important discussion to have, which is like 4 different sentences that say absolutely nothing. But other than, hey, yeah, like none of these decisions are locked in stone, which I think is common sense. Like, of course, that's the case. That's sort of always the case. Sony's putting games on PC until they're not. Game Pass is $30 until it isn't. Exclusives, there's no such thing as exclusive Xbox games until there is, right? Like, this is probably where they need to be when it comes to getting ready to launch new hardware. I just don't think that, like, long term, I don't think that there's any sort of, I don't know, like the benefit of exclusive games. I feel like this is one of those hearts and minds conversations that never quite bears out in the numbers. And if it does, it's something that only matters in the early days of a generation. And I think nowadays there are different factors, but that's the sort of thing. The idea of like, oh, exclusive games, like I need to pick between Xbox and PlayStation. Which one should I get? Well, this one has games I can't get anywhere else, so that's a point in that one's favor. And I should get that one. I think that's the idea that Sony and Microsoft are both like rolling around in their minds. And so if Sony is going to bail on putting games on PC, part of that is because they want to put everything they can behind the PlayStation 6. And they want to, they're gonna do everything they can to make that platform as successful as they possibly can. And so, I don't think that that's a massive number. Like, how many PlayStation 6s do you think they sell because they're no longer putting games on PC? I don't think that's a huge number. I think that PC players have PCs already. They like playing games on PC, and I don't know if you've noticed, there are 1 trillion games on the PC all the time, way more than there are on any of these console platforms. The console platforms get the majority of the big releases, for sure. So I don't mean to say it's a night and day difference, but, there's just more stuff coming out on the PC, and the overwhelming majority of games that people want to play, meaning games released by third parties, are always going to be released on PC. And so the potential for an exclusive PlayStation game and what that does for their sales feels very muted in this day and age. I would say the same thing for Microsoft, but also because Microsoft is making a PC, it's really just they're not going to put it on PlayStation, which I don't think that matters at all. I don't think that's a needle mover on sales. If you're like, oh, by the way, if and this is what they're saying is like, hey, this stuff's on the table. We'll look at the data and decide then. If they look at the data and go, actually, we need to pull back, and so Forza Horizon 7 and, you know, the new Halo in the Unreal Engine, the actual new one, is only going to come to Xbox and PC. I just don't think that is something that sells consoles the way it did 20 years ago. When they could market the Xbox as the place to play a Halo game, that was a big deal. And PC wasn't where it is today in terms of console ports and controller compatibility and everything else. So the PC was not a threat in the same way it was then. And so that decision between Microsoft and Sony, and perhaps Nintendo, depending on what they're doing at any given moment, is really a closed conversation about those platforms, and PC was not really a factor then. And now that it is, and now that, you know, obviously Microsoft is not going to stop making games that appear on PC, the idea of then pulling back and also saying we're not going to put it on PlayStation, this is just gut reaction type stuff. But knowing what I know about exclusives over the years and what the impact they actually do tend to have on platform sales and whatever, I don't think it matters the same way it did anymore. And I think it would be fine, but like not a long-term decision. I'll put it to you this way. If they were to come out and say, hey, Xbox games are exclusive to Xbox now, and by that we mean Xbox and Windows PCs, I feel like even that would have to be a short-term decision that they would then, in a couple of years' time, go, okay, these games are on PlayStation again. Much like I think that if we got down the line and the numbers bore out in the right way, in the way that I think they would, I would not be shocked if PlayStation, after the launch of PlayStation 6 has come and gone, and it's an established platform or whatever, I could very much see them going, okay, these games are going to be on PC again. Because ultimately, these games are still expensive to make. And I have not heard anyone talking about amazing ways to rein in development costs for individual games. You can amortize that across multiple projects because they're on the same engine, or it's a sequel to this and that. And so, you know, hey, we spent all this money up front and then we made 3 games on the back of it, which is, you know, that's a tale as old as time at this point, you know. But like, you can have situations like that, but the individual games, the assets that are being made, the like all of this stuff, very expensive. AI is not going to save them from that. Cheap outsourcing to workers outside the United States is not going to save them from that. Anyone, Sony, Microsoft, anybody. Like, that's just, I think, the reality of it. And I do think that we will see some companies pull back on the length of games, the content in a game. There was some talk about this supposed Venom game that Sony is, as I understand it, still very much working on. I think that is going to be a Miles Morales style of, hey, we made a shorter one of these. Much like the Miles Morales game was shorter than Spider-Man 1. If not even shorter. We'll see on that. I'm not 100% positive on that stuff. But if they start coming out with games that have just straight up less content in them and you finish them faster, and they are still $70, how will people feel about that? I'm not sure. The data suggests that people don't finish video games anyway. So with that in mind, shorter video games should not be a problem at all. But it's a perception issue, more so than an actual data-driven or strategic-driven approach to game design. If players feel like they're getting less for the money, that may be a problem. And yeah, yes, as Alma in the chat suggests, how well is Pragmata doing? We'll see, right? How will Pragmata do long term? The number one thing I've seen people say about Pragmata, as you are telling them that it is a very great game, is they will say, when it's on sale, I will buy that game. Because I'm hearing it's short. And that's fine. But what, you can't do that for every game, or again, no one will make their money back, and we'll have a whole other problem. So there's a lot of it's a mess all around, I guess, is where I'm at with this, and I don't think that making the games exclusive is something that's going to offset that forever. Now, when you make games exclusive, you do that with the knowledge that they're not going to sell as many copies. You're going to make less money off the individual game. And so your hope is people bought a PlayStation to play this game. People bought an Xbox to play this video game. And so the math on the back end makes it up, because you go, oh, well, they bought an Xbox, and now we know as an Xbox user, they are likely to spend X number of dollars a year for the next 5 years in our ecosystem. And so it was worth it for us to lose money on that game because it got them into our ecosystem and got them to spend more money, whether that's on subscriptions, DLC, more games, whatever. Attach rate, blah, words. And I think that that's interesting, and I think that in a vacuum, you can start to make those arguments. The problem we run into is this isn't a vacuum. We are several generations in on these ecosystems, and backwards compatibility continues to be a factor. It used to be something that in the Xbox 360 days, we thought about like friends lists. And like, oh, well, when the next Xbox comes out, and this is something that like in the early days of Xbox One, you did see this argument of just like, well, I get games with gold, and my friends list is here, and my gamer score is here, and so there's just like ecosystem reasons why people go from Xbox to Xbox. When it was clear relatively early on that like the sound move was to go from Xbox 360 to PlayStation 4. That lock-in, that ecosystem lock-in matters, and there's an inertia here, like you end up, you have this long list of digital purchases that like some players are not willing to walk away from. And also like in their head, they're not willing to just like leave their old Xbox hooked up. Because you could always just leave it hooked up and play all your old games there while buying new games on a new system or something. Like that's not that crazy. There's so many HDMI ports on the back of your TV. You'll be fine. And so then you get into that actual literal thing of just like, how much does this actually matter? And that's the stuff I don't really know anymore. It was a sound argument when we were talking about Xbox 360 to Xbox One, because I feel like the PlayStation equivalent, it came like late in the PS3 generation. Well, not late, but it was not there at launch of the PS3. And so it was something that always felt like very... it was half-assed, but also it was free. And so you got what you paid for. And I don't know a single person in that era that cared about their friends list on a PlayStation 3. I know a lot of people who cared about their friends list on an Xbox 360. And playing games there because that's where their friends were playing games. Now, all these years later, we have cross-play, we have cross-progression in some cases. Like we have a lot of, and we have like, yeah, Discord and like the number of people that go off platform for any kind of like friends gathering, matchmaking, whatever. Like how many players are jumping into a party chat on an Xbox in 2026 and on like half of them are just playing different games and just shooting the shit while they're doing so. It was a fairly common thing back then. I can't imagine that happens anymore. I don't look at my PlayStation friends list or my Xbox friends list. I talk to folks on Discord. And then when we want to play, or I get text messages from people who are not big Discord people, and then we coordinate a thing, and then it's like, okay, well, my friends list on my friend name on this platform or individual game, because we're playing across different platforms, and so you have to have like an account name that is specific, like, well, here's my Bungie name so that you can add me so that we can go fucking murder people in Marathon. Like that is the stuff that matters now. Your Call of Duty Activision name, not your PlayStation account name or whatever. And so like that landscape has become so complicated compared to just like, I don't know, I use an Xbox and all my friends list and everything is all right here. And if we're going to do something, we're going to do it right here. Or maybe I'm on fucking IRC talking to, like, I sent an instant message to somebody and then now we're playing Halo, like whatever. It was not... as complicated and as cross-platform as it kind of has to be now. All that said is again, I think that when you think about that complicated landscape, I think the conversation around exclusive games becomes like real weird, because we had all these things that seemed like they were hooks for why you would buy one console over another. But in a world where the consoles are like a stone's throw away from each other power-wise, and so like the experience of playing a game on an Xbox Series X versus a PlayStation 5 is really not that different. If you get the Pro into the mix, like there are some differences, but even those are, I would say, nominal. I feel like the type of players, it's not that big of a deal. The improvements you get on a PS5 Pro. It's not to say they don't exist, but you know. And so I think you end up in this situation where like the hooks for getting people to choose one over the other are really strange, and you've got to find anything you can in the early days of a generation to try to get people to pick one over the other. As such, I would not be surprised if both of them try to make exclusive games a thing for the early days of their next platform. And I would be equally unsurprised if those strategies end up lightening up and getting lax after the platforms have become established. And then we go right back to, okay, yeah, I don't know, Xbox games are on PlayStation and PlayStation games are on PC. And if Sony finds themselves in a weird place, maybe fucking PlayStation games are on Xbox, or maybe PlayStation games are on Switch too. That seemed like a thing that was going to happen at one point. But none of this would be shocking, I guess. Like, everything is back on the table. And that's really what this interview with Asha Sharma and Matt Booty says to me, is that, and by that I mean literally everything, you know, like Totillo is asking them questions about like shipping a console and time frames and everything else, and they're very unwilling to commit to anything. They acknowledge that, like, hey, everything is crazy right now, RAM is fucked, like, you know, like making stuff is hard. And so even when it comes to, you know, making an affordable console and everything else, like, they can't even really commit to that just because of the way things are now. And, you know, you have to acknowledge, like, the majority of these issues are also affecting PlayStation. These are industry-wide issues when it comes to making and shipping hardware. This is not something that, like, Xbox is like, oh, we found ourselves behind the 8 ball. Like, everyone has to figure this out. And so, like, these are they gave the right answers insofar as they gave no answers and left as many doors open as they possibly could, because I really think that's the reality of the situation for everyone right now, is there's stuff with new hardware that is, like, going to come to a head sooner or later. And if they want developers to make games for these platforms, they have to commit to a date and a time frame and a ship date. Like, all of this stuff kind of has to be right around the corner, whether they're ready or not. And, they're right to take it slow, and they're right to not commit to this stuff. And it's been interesting to see some of the online reaction to the Game Pass price change. I saw a handful of posts, this is like 5 or 6 within a very short time frame, the day after the Game Pass price change, the day after the Call of Duty coming out of Game Pass thing. I saw people going like, Xbox is making a lot of good moves lately. They're making all the right moves. Like, they made a single move. They made 2 moves. They got rid of the Microsoft Gaming name and changed it back to Xbox, and they took Call of Duty out of Game Pass. Everything else they're doing is signaling, we don't really know. We're going to see which way the wind blows, and we'll figure it out then. Like, Game Pass, they will have to address it again. They have to change things. They will change things. Will they be positive changes? There's been talk about, like, spreading it out even further and making more of an a la carte setup so you can pick and choose what you want, which defeats the whole purpose of a fucking bundle in the first place. But okay, I guess. You know? And so, like, I just look at it and go, like, I don't feel like they've unfucked anything about their situation. They're keeping everything on the table, and that's the smart move right now. And that's where we're at. Everything is still evolving. I'm sure they have plans in place of this is probably what we're going to do. We're still thinking about, like, there's a quote from them about, like, kind of the, you know, the multi-platform stuff, and her answer is, it's been 60 days. You know, these are decade-long decisions from before. These are very consequential decisions. I want to make the right decision, not the fastest decision. And so that all that really says is, we're listening. It's not a move. They're not making moves. People out there going like, Xbox is making a lot of the great moves lately. Like, what? Okay. Like, you have a really low bar for moves, I think, if you are looking at this and going, yeah, because they haven't really changed much of anything. The Call of Duty thing, okay, sure. But again, in a world where they're about to ship a device over the next few years here that is a PC and in a quote-unquote Xbox, they will have to redefine Game Pass yet again around, you know, are they going to keep making people pay for online video games? Which seems like an insane concept to keep going with if you're shipping a Windows-ass PC. Because wouldn't you just install Steam on it and go, yeah, fuck off? Right? Or maybe they'll pull back from that too. That would be a weird one. If they said, yeah, this is technically a Windows machine, but also we're not letting you install anything on it. It's like, okay, what's the point then? Well, you know, PC games that don't appear on the Xbox storefront or this or that, and this, like, there's just a lot of if they go through this entire soul searching process and they talk about, hey, the power of Windows and all of the other stuff that they've said so far about their console, and then at the end of the day they actually just say, nope, it's a closed system just like the last one, but with the magic of Windows inside, or some kind of weird hand wavy kind of thing that does not translate to you being able to, you know, install stuff on it. That will be very funny. That would be a sign that they feel like the reset out of the generations is throwing everything up in the air again. That would be a sign that they look at it and go like, actually, we think we can get this back. We don't think that Sony's dominance is like ingrained. We don't think that they are necessarily going to just like put us out of business forever. And so we have to try this. And that sounds incredibly uninteresting to me. Because I think that the idea of them, like the idea of, hey, we're making a PC and you can install stuff on it, feels very clued into just the realities of how people play games and where people play games and everything else. And it might not be something that benefits Microsoft's existing games business to the degree that some people want, but I think that business is going to go away one way or the other. And so I think getting ahead of it as much as they can, you know, they're kind of ahead of they're running out of time to be ahead of it, I guess. And say, actually, we're going to lean into this idea and say, here's the next device, and it's also a PC, and so you have a real freedom here that you're never going to get on a fucking PlayStation. Like, to me, that's a move. It's a move that costs them game sales and their cut of sales of games on their storefronts and all of that. But it's a move that makes me much more interested in that hardware than I would be otherwise. But they've got to run, and you know, they're still running numbers, and they still have to like figure out, will whatever the PlayStation 6 approach end up being work or not. It's funny. You can sit here and you can talk about the console war is over, but it's over until it's not. Much like all of these decisions, if two devices are launching in the same price range at a very similar point in time, there is at least a war on there in that moment of we want to make people choose ours over anyone else's, and we need to make decisions that help that campaign. That's the battle we're fighting right now, is we need people to buy a fucking Xbox. And if that's at the expense of a PlayStation, so be it. If it's at the expense of a Switch 2, so be it. If it's at the expense of a decent amount of heroin, so be it. Like whatever, man. It just gets into that, like you've got to get people to buy one of these boxes. Otherwise, you don't have the install base to make the moves you want to make anywhere down the line. And then you're fucked even faster. So it's like I would not take any of these moves that are probably about to be made over the next couple of years here as anything other than we need to sell a device, and so everything has to change to support that. And then once that's over, we'll change it all again. None of this is set in stone. It never is. It's a good reminder that it never is. Valve is in a similar boat here. Obviously, they are shipping the Steam controller next week, and they are not shipping the Steam machine. And you ask them why, and the quote that Video Games Chronicle pulled out of this Polygon interview is, this doesn't have RAM. There's no RAM in the controller, so we can just ship it whenever. Obviously, Steam machines are not easy to make, and they're still figuring out what to do with the Steam Deck line in the future, because that's going out of stock as a result of just parts being harder to fucking find. And Valve is a big company in our world, right? But then at the end of the day, they're not manufacturing hardware on the scale of any of these other companies that need RAM, like fucking Apple or Ford. I don't know. Like the pandemic days of chip shortages were real bad. And those kind of lightened up, but never really got back to where they were. And now we're just facing down another shortage for another even dumber reason. And so here we are. We'll see what price they end up landing on for the Steam machines when they do finally acknowledge that stuff. But for now, the Steam controller is $100. And it is out next week. They're going to ship it Monday morning. They will start taking pre-orders Monday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And it sounds like that they're just going to start shipping those things. As someone with a Bazite install, I will say that I have to have a keyboard hooked up to that machine a lot of the time, because and a mouse. The mouse specifically is the problem. And I would like to not have to do that. And so it's kind of cool, the idea of getting the exact controls that you get on a Steam Deck, with the exception of a touchscreen, of course. Getting that for $100 actually is not as bad of a deal as people think. The price is shocking some people, because they go, oh, it's just a controller. And you're like, well, okay, yeah. But also it's got all these touchpads on it that duplicate a mouse. It has back paddles. It is not $200 like a DualSense Edge is, or an Xbox Elite controller. And also, like, PlayStation 5 controllers are like $80. Like, they're not, like, yes, they're not $100, but they are like $80 or $85, depending on what color you're getting. And so I don't know. I am not super sympathetic to the price discussion around this controller, because it straight up does more. Yeah, the Switch Pro 2 controller is $90 fucking dollars. This is not a great controller. It doesn't even have analog triggers, the Pro 2. It's got 2 back buttons. It still has a game chat button, a button that someday someone in the world will press, but not today. So yeah, I don't know, $100 for a controller that has like 2 mouse touchpads and the haptics that go with that, and like, yeah, that's that's a very reasonable price. If you don't think so, I think you're kind of misunderstanding the market for controllers these days, because it's real weird. I think that this is great. Again, the place that I would probably use this is on the PC that I have hooked up to my TV, where Bazite is installed, and so it's already kind of like a Steam machine style experience. I think that would be a great use case for it, because right now it's not easy to have a mouse and keyboard hooked up to a thing that's hooked up to your television, because you don't have a desk near your TV. And so anytime I need to do anything with a keyboard or a mouse, I got to lean up there and hit it and move back, and the kids get the mouse while I'm playing a game and fuck everything all up, and it's no good. It's no good. Antonio says, there's a share button on the PlayStation controller. Don't see the hate for that. That's because it's years old and people were hating it back then. It's a stupid button. All of those like social button, like here's a thing we're going to put on it to, let you take a screenshot or whatever. Like all of that shit has always sucked. Like people, there's no like, yeah. Like, oh, no one complained about this controller that is now 5 years old. Like, yeah, they did. They did. And when you hook it up to a PC, it just, sometimes just works as a select button the way you expect, which is nice. None of this is the new functionality we talk about when we talk about like controllers and like what could people do that's new with controllers. Valve is approaching this. Valve is approaching this in the exact opposite way of, say, the way Nintendo approaches controller design. And I think that's very interesting. Valve has looked at the games that are on Steam, existing games that exist today, and they are looking at how can we make a controller that lets you play those games more effectively in an environment where you're not sitting at a full computer. And they have hit upon a series of interesting options, both software and hardware side, for, if we do this weird chording thing, you can do this. And they have found a way to make a great controller that works for a much larger array of games than you would initially think. And it's a fascinating way to design a controller. They're a company that doesn't make video games all that often. And so this is like a very interesting approach. Now compare it to Nintendo sitting down and saying, Mario needs to run in 3 dimensions. We designed a controller around that. Or, hey, we want to make a game where you can wave the controller around and do bowling. And so we made an entire controller that's really good for that. And if you're making John Madden football on this thing, God fucking help you. But anyway, here it is. We don't care. Third parties can eat shit. That is the Nintendo way of, we designed a game and then we made a controller that's perfect for that game, and they are holistic and unified, and isn't that awesome? Tell the third parties that we said good fucking luck making things for a system that has an analog stick in the middle. Meanwhile, everyone else is coming out with sticks that have 2 analog sticks. Whoops. They still don't even have fucking analog triggers. Like the Switch 2. How am I to play driving games? It's really goofy. And so like it's just an interesting kind of contrasting approach, right? Where Valve sits down and looks at like what games are selling on Steam. Can we make a controller that works well enough for these games that, like most people are probably using a mouse and keyboard to play. Can we solve for that with a single controller? And they've done a really great job. Like the Steam Deck controls are amazing. It's a problem that like a lot of these other handheld devices don't solve, right? Like the ROG tries to solve it with a bunch of software overlays and the Xbox app that is not good. And, like, oh, you can kind of have Steam Big Picture and this and that, other weird shit like that. But then, you're still kind of left out in the cold to some degree. Yeah, Steam controller looks like the right thing for them to, we talked about this back when they announced it. Like it's a very knowable layout. You look at it and go like, yep, I've used this style of control, and I've used all of the Steam software that, can be used to configure this controller in a zillion different ways. And I think that's, that stuff, that is where the true magic of this lies. Of the Steam Deck in particular, but also this controller will be able to take advantage of it, is all of the different layouts and community layouts and, people adapting these controls for things like the games that don't even run on Steam, applications, emulators, like, oh, we need a radial menu that we can use to save state in this PS2 emulator. And if we configure it just like this, it'll do it, like weird macros and all of this other crazy shit. Like that stuff has come so far since the days of the original Steam controller. Like Steam input is incredible. Absolutely incredible. And that, I think, doesn't get talked about enough. Like the software side of it is like of where Steam is at with this specific type of controller support is really fucking wild. What else is going on? EA is going to make a new UFC game. This is about right. I mean, when was the last one? This game is, they announced it and it's out like a couple of months from now. EA Sports UFC 6 will be released on June 19th, according to videogameschronicle.com. If you pay for the expensive version, you will get it a full 7 days early. Which, at some point, I feel like the longer that window gets, the more desperate you sound for your game. I don't know. No real details on what is happening in the game, or if there will be, will there be some kind of like fight at the White House, jump out of the octagon and have a new January 6th kind of, like, will there be like a January 6th mini game? Like, will you be able to play as Dana White and smack his wife around? The stuff that like a UFC fan might be really into these days. I don't know. Like, we'll see. June 19th for that game. Will Jake Hager be in it? Will there be a power slap? With a career mode, start you in power slap. UFC used to be pretty cool, man. But that was decades ago. Those first few UFC games that like Anchor was making were maybe not the best representations of what was happening in the ring. But those games were awesome because they just kind of made Tekken. Like, not to the degree, but like, you had, button layouts that were one limb per button, and it was very counter heavy of like, you're catching the legs and you're catching the arms the same way a Paul Phoenix might. And so they made like a pretty decent little fighting game that was rooted in reality in a way that, certainly Tekken was not. And those games were pretty good. And then, I don't know, man. Like, it just sort of... The thing I've always said is that at some point people started training specifically to be an MMA instead of training at their martial art of choice. And as the fighters homogenized their styles, I like, UFC is the most boring thing in the fucking world to me now. It's like, yep, these guys came in and did the exact same shit. Instead of like, it was fucking like the early days of UFC, as I've said again and again, it felt like real life Street Fighter. It felt like people coming in different sizes, different styles, like people just coming in and going like, well, I'm the Kuksul Wan master and I'm fucking taking on all comers. And then you had like, I'm Tank Abbott. I'm the biggest idiot in the world and I'm going to fight too. Like, it was just like fucking morons, but like fighting against disciplined martial artists. And you'd always get like some dumbass who just looks like, I won a bunch of bar fights and here I am. And they're like, okay, no hooking, go. you know, and it was just like fucking fascinating shit, man. Early days of UFC, I feel like the discussion about that belongs in the exact same like position of your brain that when you talk about like, yeah, CKY2K, that was some shit. Yo, man, when that dude was running at full speed wearing clear underwear and shit his pants, that was when it was real. You know? And now Jackass is a film. I don't know. I'm gonna go to a movie theater to watch Jackass. No, you should not be able to go to a movie theater to watch fucking Jackass. Stuff like that should be like traded, like, yo, man, hey, guys, I got this tape. And then you get it and you're like, what the fuck why do you have this? Where did you get this? It should be Faces of Death adjacent. Anyway. Atari has acquired Implicit Conversions, which is a studio that specializes in, emulation-related projects. They did some work on the PlayStation-era games found in the Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection, and so they have been brought in-house and now are owned by Atari. So they will kind of sit with like, Night Dive and Digital Eclipse as like one of the handful of companies they own now that specializes in having emulation-focused engines and bringing games back. To hear Dan Amrich was on Blue Sky talking about this acquisition, and he said, hey, like these guys were super crucial to some of the stuff in Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection, and it's awesome to have them be, like a part of the company or whatever. He was not speaking in an official capacity, but he seemed stoked about the idea of them being around. And so that grows Atari's like, Atari has been on like an interesting acquisition spree. I mean, I say spree, but they've spread it out a little bit. But they have been buying these studios that specialize in re-releasing old games and doing them in intelligent and cool ways. And I think that's been very interesting. And I don't really know, like a lot of that could serve the stuff that Digital Eclipse had talked about wanting to do with these documentaries and everything else that they're doing. Having more studios in-house that can handle the work of emulating those games can only be a good thing for those sorts of projects. And yeah, we'll see where that goes, but I do think it means we will see more, and of course, we will see more emulation-focused projects from them in the future. Sega is trying to get in on the act, I guess, but they said this before. It's a weird, they put out this website, I guess, for Sega Universe and a little trailer that says, no old, stay gold, that's very stupid. A very stupid thing to write down and make the focus of your campaign. But hey, this website doesn't really, they just say, hey, we've got some games that have some important anniversaries coming up. And they included Sega Gaga on the list, which is a super weird one to kind of mention. And like Rent a Hero, but also Streets of Rage and Outrun and Knights. Sakura Wars, which I wonder, they'll have to make a new one of those at some point, won't they? Along with Guardian Heroes and all of that. So it's some of this stuff seems like it is more about whether it's merchandise or kind of non-game projects involving some of these properties. And so I wonder if this is just them announcing a t-shirt line. Like it could very easily be something that simple, but like Sega has been trying to signal that they want to do more with their older franchises for kind of a while now, right? Like they went ahead and announced like, oh, we're doing a new Jet Set Radio. We're doing new this and that. Like there's just like projects they've announced that have yet to materialize in a real way. And I don't really know where they're going with all of this. Um, but enough of these properties are legendary that like I want to see this stuff. And I don't want all of it to be, not that that Shinobi game they put out was solid. It was like a fun new game from a, you know, relatively small developer and whatever, but like I don't necessarily want to see a zillion projects like that. And they have said like we want to make it a super game. And bring back Crazy Taxi and do this and do that. And like I just don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And enough time has passed that I start to wonder if they know what the fuck they're talking about. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think there's a lot of opportunities for like some of these Sega properties, like if they wanted to license them out for a season of anime, or hey, we're making a cool jacket that has fucking Death Adder on the back of it. Like, yeah, you could do that. We're going to partner with various classic vaporwave producers to make a new Echo the Dolphin themed Eccojam compilation. Like, there's a lot of different shit they could be doing that would actually be kind of cool. When it comes to like leveraging all of their existing properties that they might not want to touch with a game. Some of the stuff they're going to do because there's interest there from developers that are not them, that are willing to probably take the risk themselves, right? Like this Echo the Dolphin thing where they're going to re-release all of this Echo the Dolphin stuff, and then theoretically the original designer of that game is going to go on to make a new Echo the Dolphin. I just look at it and go like, I mean, if I were Sega, I would never fund that. I would never go like, yes, the time is now, because there's just bigger fish to fry, if we're being honest, than that fucking dolphin and those aliens or whatever the hell happened in Echo the Dolphin. The idea that they would start with that instead of going like, oh yeah, I don't know, we're going to make a new Outrun, or we're going to make a new Golden Axe, or we're going to make a new Streets of Rage, a new Streets of Rage. The idea that they would instead, yes, a new Mr. Bones, finally. Bug 3 is upon us, right? No? Whatever. They should be making a Bug 3. I'm lying. They should not make a Bug 3. They should not have made a Bug 2. I might go so far as to say there should not have been a Bug 1. I got it. My copy of Bug 1 is back there on the shelf. I ripped it. I dumped it, because there's a bunch of new dumping tools out over the last few months that dump accurate versions of discs, and I wanted to make sure it worked. And so I dumped my copy of Bug and compared the CRCs to the versions that are available online, and it all matched. And I'm like, cool, I've got a good way to dump discs again that is easy and does not involve me having an ancient Plexter drive. They should not make a new Bug. But they should do something with Guardian Heroes. They should do something with, I mean, if they're going to make an Outrun movie, which apparently they are, which isn't an Outrun movie, isn't that just a sequel to The Chase with Charlie Sheen and Elizabeth Shue? If they're making a new Outrun, if they're making an Outrun into a movie, isn't it just that movie again? Aren't they? Isn't it just a reboot of The Chase, the Charlie Sheen classic, Chuck Sheen's finest work, outside of Hot Shots Part 1? Sorry, yes, it was Christy Swanson. It's not Elizabeth Shue. It is Christy Swanson. Those are both actresses that my now dead roommate loved, so you see why I would confuse the two. Anyway. They had a big Final Fantasy 14 festival. FanFest 2026. And they announced that Final Fantasy 14 is coming to the Switch 2 alongside the release of the new expansion. This is what they're making, you know, like Final Fantasy, like you understand that this game is like, has been around for years and it's a big deal. And when you hear people talk about their love of Final Fantasy 14, like it's very entrenched and deep and knowledgeable and everything else. I personally think the people that talk about Final Fantasy 11 still are more interesting because they're a next level. There's a next level craziness there that I go, yeah, fuck yeah, awesome. But I am still surprised sometimes at the idea that Final Fantasy 14 is big enough to have a fan festival. Which, that shouldn't be weird. It's Final Fantasy. It's one of the most popular and enduring franchises in the history of video games. But also something about them saying, we're having an event in Anaheim. Like, it's just weird to me. Like, really? For fucking Final Fantasy? Really? Okay. But it's a big video game. It has been for a long time. Anyway, they announced the new expansion, and they also announced that the game will be coming to Switch 2. I guess early next year. They're overhauling the battle system, and they're changing up some of the jobs. They're raising the level cap. You know, MMO patch expansion things. We're raising the level cap. We're putting a new thing in it. Thanks for coming. Thanks for dressing up. There's been some DRM and online check-related news lately. This is kind of twofold. Sony has rolled out a new change to digital purchases that require you to phone home every 30 days if you want to keep using the game. This change rolled out with zero fanfare, and so when it first happened, people thought it was a bug, and because Sony has garbage-ass chatbot support, I think someone got the chatbot to say, oh, that's not a real, that's a temporary, yeah, it's not, that's, no, we're not making that change. But it seems like they are, that it is in fact not a bug, despite for a while saying it was a bug. But also I don't know that Sony has necessarily gone on the record about it. It's what I'm saying is that some portion of this is still a little bit in flux because we've not necessarily had a big statement out of them saying, yes, we made this change. Because, surely this is not a change that they want to get out there and announce and say like, yes, we've definitely made this change because fuck you. Ha ha ha. And so people are unhappy. But what this is any game you've purchased since sometime in March when this change rolled out, basically in order to continue playing it, you need to connect your PlayStation to the internet every 30 days. If you go 30 days without connecting, the license will eventually expire and the game will no longer boot until you connect to the internet and do it again. This is interesting. I don't know. I guess like the one thing that's missing from all of these news stories of people going like, this is a change they've made, is I don't know what the previous policy was around this, because surely they would make you occasionally check in online, because otherwise you could just install a bunch of games, log out, and then give that PlayStation to someone and they could play those games for free for a long time. I'm sure there was some policy in place to try to prevent some of that stuff. To the degree that when people started complaining about this, I was like, wait, didn't they already kind of have something like this in place? And this is, these are issues that really become more of a problem when you think about an era where the PlayStation Network is gone and you can't log in to check anymore decades down the line, or who knows, maybe next year with the way things are going. Who could say? After the bombs drop, will the PSN servers still work? Yes or no? Will I be able to log in and play Hades 2 from my bunker that I have hastily dug underneath my garage? Or will I be able to play it for the first 30 days and then it will stop working and I'll go, and I won't be able to get online and see if anyone's fixed it because the internet will be gone by then. EMPs will have shorted out all the servers and we'll be... I'm not sure how I feel. Like this is something that I like. There probably needs to be something in place for this, but they need to also solve the problem of what happens in an end of life situation. There were problems with previous generations of consoles where, like, if your CMOS battery died, the games wouldn't boot anymore because the battery, would not keep the date, and so once the date was invalidated, the games could not launch anymore, and so it was sort of a preservation conversation at that point. But I am not sure what the actual solution to this is in such a way that that this is something that people are trying to get very up in arms about. I've seen people try to say, like, Sony's doing the very thing they mocked Xbox about in the early days of the Xbox One. Urgh! They're like, I don't know about that. That's not exactly what the Xbox One DRM situation was. Different because it applied to physical discs and not just your online purchases. Because the discs would just become serial numbers in a general sense. And also that was a very long time ago when I think people had much more, we were in situations where the internet was a little easier to outrun. There were more backwoods places you could go that did not have cell signal or internet or anything to that effect. I feel like that's not as much of an issue anymore. And I wonder how many, like, and this is probably the thing that they try to figure out when they think about changes like this, is you wonder what percentage of players actually run into this situation ever, where they're offline for 30 days or more. I think that, like, it's a shitty change, and players should have more rights to their games and not less. But also in a world where they are attempting to prevent casual piracy, I am at least understanding of why they would try to make changes that would curb that. So it's I don't know. It's not a great situation. And I don't think it's a change they should have made in the middle of a generation like this, or I guess near the end of one, depending on which numbers you believe. But it's I don't know. It's a weird scenario. I wonder how many players will be legitimately affected by this, and like what was the catalyst of this change? I would be curious to know, like, why now? What is the thing they were trying to stop? I think that you could argue that probably some portion of what they're trying to stop is, and I would actually say this is probably futile, but there are cases where you want to keep your PlayStation on old firmware, and there's like a couple of games that have weird bugs with them that you can exploit in a way that lets you, I don't know if it's like full on install custom firmware, but you can basically, with a copy of like Star Wars Galactic Race, whatever, it's a Star Wars, it's one of the Star Wars re-releases. You get a hold of a copy of that, and then you can use that to hack your system in such a way that lets you, and it's why that game has become very expensive in the resale market, I guess. But you can hack your console to install pirated games on it, in a sense. But I would think that once you're at the point where you're able to install pirated games on it, you are probably also able to bypass the online check, or if you're not currently able, that is something that people will probably crack. And I wonder if that is the thing they are trying to address with this change. If this is something that if that is the reason why they would make a change like this, I don't know. If it is something where there's like, there's a potential, like Sony, the thing to remember with Sony is that because of the way things went down on the PlayStation 3, they are extremely sensitive to issues around holes in the firmware, custom firmware, like all of that sort of stuff. As I've said, this is why they did not send out Vita debug hardware to the press, because they were convinced that that would lead to custom firmware for the Vita. Which, haha, custom firmware for the Vita existed anyway, even though they didn't send debug hardware out to the press. Yes, it's the reason why Nintendo doesn't have a web browser in their consoles anymore, is because people were using that, and now you have to instead, because they have to leave captive portal support into their on their devices, so they have to have a web browser of some kind, because some Wi-Fi pops a web browser in order for you to click a button that says, I'm connecting to your Wi-Fi, and I promise not to steal whatever. And so they still have to have a fucking browser in there. So this is sort of a weird, I don't know. Yes, and Nintendo doesn't let you store saves on SD cards anymore, right? Like they can only store saves internally, because if you could remove an SD card with a save on it, you could modify that save, put it back into the system, and use it to hack the console. Like they're trying to cut down on a lot of those attack vectors. Whether they're real or not does not matter. Like the number of people that are hacking a PlayStation 5 in this specific way, if this is in fact the issue, has to be small. But they have to at least close the holes they're aware of. And I wonder if this is them trying to close one of those holes. And I don't know off the top of my head. That could be something that they're trying to do with this change on PlayStation. But it is something that impacts PS4 and PS5, and so that kind of, then you're just like, I don't know, like what's the real problem here? What was the problem they're trying to solve? Are people like, oh, no one's buying digital games on PS4 and PS5 anymore because they're just stealing them? Like, that's not a problem. Like, piracy on these consoles is not a huge, widespread problem. You could argue that maybe they're trying to keep it that way, and maybe they're closing a hole that could have led to more widespread issues with security. But it's hard to imagine that this is a genuine issue where actual money is being lost, or that there is some massive security hole that is fixed by something as simple as a 30-day online check. And so I don't really know. Yeah, we don't really know. Speaking of online checks and piracy, your friends over at videogameschronicle.com are reporting that 2K has added some online checks to some of its recent releases in the wake of Denuvo being cracked. Denuvo is a, let's say, controversial DRM package that developers can license from the company that makes it, and they can put it into their games, and it protects games. These games ended up being like difficult to hack. Denuvo also has a reputation of impacting performance in some cases. Games running worse because they have Denuvo in them, which is the exact opposite of what you want. And it's also why sometimes games get Denuvo released after some chunk of time. Sometimes that's 6 months, sometimes it's 1 month, because Denuvo is expensive to maintain on the developer side, and also the performance hit, and also, whatever. So if the games do eventually get cracked, usually the Denuvo gets stripped out, which is an ironic way for the stuff to go. Modern Denuvo was very difficult to hack. There was I think my understanding of it is that we reached a point where there was really only a very small handful of people in the world that knew how to hack and crack Denuvo games and release them publicly without that DRM. But something has changed on that front, and Denuvo has become a little bit easier to crack. And so as a result of this, this is VGC's reporting on this via, and they have some additional sourcing from Tom's Hardware. But there's basically there's a Denuvo bypass where you're installing a kernel level driver that is kind of spoofing the de novo requests and using it to bypass it, which is kind of fucking nuts. But basically, you know, it sounds like that this eventually made a situation where they could publicly release cracked versions of some of these games that had de novo support. What has changed, and also I'll tell you, going to a hacking group and saying, yes, give me a kernel level driver just so I can play some cracked video games, and trusting them to then have that be a secure and safe thing that doesn't get exploited by other people, and you have installed a kernel level driver on your system made by people that are trying to steal video games, what would stop other people from using that to fucking also then go and fucking completely rootkit the shit out of your system, like all of this other stuff. A trust me bro kernel level driver seems like the worst fucking thing you could be doing. But hey, to each their own. 2K has responded to this seemingly by adding online checks to multiple games. Tom's Hardware is reporting that NBA 2K25, 2K26, and Marvel's Midnight Suns now use effectively an auth token that expires after 14 days. So you 30-day PlayStation kids got it good. This strikes me as a situation where they are testing it out, because you would not put this in Midnight Suns unless you were just running a test, because they're not out there going like, oh, we got to protect Midnight Suns. No, they're instead thinking about the next 5 years of their games and going, what's a game we can, you know, install this on and see if it breaks anything? What's a game we can put these online checks into when we can test it all out? How can we figure this out? And Midnight Suns drew the short straw or whatever. So don't sit there and go like, oh, why would they protect Midnight Suns? Or this, no one is buying that game anymore anyway. Like, it's literally, this is them doing it to a variety of games and testing this out in case that they can, you know, so that they can maybe do it over their next 20 releases or something, right? And so, yeah, the reporting here is that when this token runs out, the game will not load unless you connect online again, authorize your install, and get a new auth token, at which point the 14-day timer will start again. In a world, you know, like consoles, like kind of whatever, man. Like I think that there's not a lot of great reasons. Like you're not traveling with your console these days. Though that maybe with the PlayStation 6, that is, and with the next Xbox, that is more of a consideration. But on the PC, we are certainly seeing more and more portable devices. Obviously, sometimes people would just have laptops that they would play games on, and they go somewhere weird, and they're not online for a chunk of time, or they're trying to play a video game on a plane. And so the offline mode in Steam and so like all of these different scenarios where you are trying to play a game offline, I think a lot of that stuff is not very well done. Or it's not always conveyed as clearly as you would like. Like, what are the rules? How can I do this? Is there I'm going to be somewhere where there's no internet, which, as we talk more and more about handhelds, becomes a more realistic situation, right? And so how do these games respond not only when there's no internet, but when they have internet and then lose it? Do they crash to desktop? What happens? They go, you had internet and now you don't, and so we got to crash it. Like, as we get more and more handheld PCs, these are scenarios that developers are going to have to consider. And a 14-day online check doesn't sound great. I would say in reality, it is exceedingly rare that I'm in a situation where I have zero internet for 14 days and, you know, it would be not difficult to connect a Steam Deck or something to that effect to a hotspot on my phone long enough for said check to complete. But actual customers shouldn't have to fucking think about this or suffer through it. This is punishing the people that bought your game to try to stop some theoretical piracy. And then if you want to get into the larger conversation, you start to get into the conversation of the vast majority of piracy does not cost the industry any fucking money at all. this idea of one pirated copy of a game equals $60 of lost revenue or whatever, whatever math problem you want to use is fucking false. And it has been forever. And so the idea of customers, both in the Sony situation and this one, though, 14 days, I think is way worse. 14 days and on a PC where you might be more likely to be traveling with it than you are with, like, I brought my PlayStation 5 on the road, like whatever. I think that is a pretty fucking bad way to handle this, is to put more shit onto your actual customers and say, hey, here's one more thing that you might accidentally have to contend with because we're trying to stop piracy. Also, like, most of the people that are downloading these games maybe never would have purchased them in the first place. You could even start to, and I think all of these arguments get into like weird specific things, but you could even argue that, like, when people pirate games and play them offline, some percentage of them are going to eventually say, you know what, I actually want to play this game here on this console, or, oh, I actually want to do the online features on this, and so next time it's on sale, I'm going to buy this game that I already stole. Again, and how many people go through that? Probably not a massive number of people, but also not a lot of them are going to go on to buy the game, to go like, oh, well, shit, dude, I couldn't find a stolen copy of it, so I guess I got to spend $70. Like, that is an exceptionally small number of people. They've proved this time and time again. Like Steam was built around, like, Steam is one big fucking DRM nightmare. If you want to look at it that way, like, that is exactly what it is. It's an entire storefront built around the idea of selling you digital copies of games that run within Steam. And people fucking love it. A little too much in some cases, I might say, but people fucking love Steam. Because Steam was built in a way that was easy to use, and people got out of your fucking way and said, hey, within reason, you can just play these goddamn video games. We're going to put some stuff in here that, you're not going to be able to fucking just yank these games out of a directory and send them to your friends. Like, we're putting something in here. But we're just trying to make it easy for you to buy video games. The same way when Apple launched the iTunes store and started selling songs for $1, they fucking cleaned up. Despite the ease with which it is to just fucking download MP3s. A lot of people don't want to fucking hassle. And they're willing to spend the money on it. As long as you get out of their fucking way. If they go and buy a game and then discover, like, oh, I was offline for 14 days and now I gotta fucking do all this stupid shit because they think I'm stealing their game, like, you're just souring people on the whole concept. And these are like narrow edge case kind of things. The reality of people running into a 14-day timer in this day and age, it's, it is what it is. The 30-day, even more so. But man, especially nowadays, like, I think even if I were in a situation where I was interested in, like, torrenting video games or applications, or, theoretically, if someone were to want to download a bunch of bootleg VSTs, dude, there's too much shit out there, man. I don't want the heebie-jeebies. I don't want to have a bunch of fucking weird shit on my fucking computer. And so the idea of fucking installing cracked fucking software nowadays, like, I just don't want to fucking open myself up to that shit. I don't want to open, like, especially when you read about, oh, you need to bypass de novo by installing a fucking kernel level driver on your fucking PC. Like, nope. Are you high? Like, how bad do you want to play fucking Midnight Suns? Not that fucking bad. Fuck that. So yeah, it's all of the conversations around this I think are horribly broken because I think a lot of them are just fake. I think a lot of the piracy conversations and DRM conversations are rooted in bullshit statistics that never pan out the way that people think they're going to. Like you can't translate all of those into sales. That said, I also don't think that every single video game should be DRM free because I think that that's just the reality of the world. Remember, like, you know, the idea here, the thing, if you're actually trying to, like, you know, stop people from pirating your game who might otherwise buy it, you're really talking about a very short window. Because you've got people who will, you know, like the people that might buy that game who might make a cursory glance of like, oh, should I just steal this instead? You just need your game to not be cracked for the first 14 days, 30 days in some cases, the first month. And that's why a lot of these companies that do use Denuvo, they fucking strip it out because Denuvo charges a fucking arm and a leg for it. And also it makes the fucking games run worse. And so past a certain point, they go, okay, we've sold the majority of the copies we're going to sell. Get that shit out of here. Why do you think they do that? If they were constantly like, oh, we've got to stop, you know, like if they were worried about piracy as just like a philosophical fucking concept, they would never do that. They would never strip it out. But it's all about like, hey, man, we want to sell copies of the games. So, you know, it's like, I feel like a lot of this is just built on bad math, bad studies, and a bad way to treat your customers. Just straight up. And Valve proved that in most ways. You know, for the most part, Valve's DRM, obviously you can sell Denuvo protected games inside of Steam, so it's not just as easy as everything on Steam is great. You know, like there's certainly a lot of nuance there, you know what I'm saying? But by and large, the convenience of Steam, that has been the number one thing to impact piracy. Has been like, oh, I can just click this button and fucking download this game. Like digital sales in general, you know? Impulse control is poor. People want to click a button and get a video game. They don't care if it costs them money or not, especially if it's going to not open them up to fucking kernel level drivers and horse shit. Which Denuvo is not a great one of those either. Remember there's a while there that it was just like, you know, Capcom had a game that they were shipping and fucking saying, yeah, okay, we're installing a rootkit on your fucking PC if you want to play Street Fighter 4 or whatever it was. Like, times have been worse than this for sure. But some of this stuff is still just fucking bad. And I don't know what the answer is other than because companies are never going to come around on that, right? Like they're never going to go like, oh, well, I guess we, you know, I guess we're just never going to, you know, close any of these security holes in our console or this or that. Because, you know, everyone remembers the Dreamcast, everyone remembers the PSP, and no one remembers the nuance around that. Everyone, like the context collapse that has happened around Dreamcast stuff is the Dreamcast would have been a smash hit, but then they found out you could just burn the discs and now it's dead. The PSP was going to last forever, but then they figured out if you installed this weird shit on your battery, then you could put it into a PSP and make it go into maintenance mode and put cool firmware on it, and the PSP was dead. Like, that's not how any of that went. Piracy did not help the Dreamcast cause, make no mistake. But the Dreamcast was off to a fucking very questionable start and was having a rocky run in the marketplace well before any of that shit happened. The power of the PlayStation 2 cannot be overestimated in that story. But everyone just likes to think like, oh, we've got to close every security hole. We got to do this because otherwise this shit's going to be busted wide open. And Sony is raw about it, you know, I think in a lot of ways because, like I said, you know, if you go back to the PS3 and some of the custom firmware stuff that appeared on the PlayStation 3 that is still out there, you know, like I think that got them freaked out. in a way that they are still freaked out. And Xbox is, I think the Xbox One, I think certain models of Xbox One were hacked relatively recently for like the first time, which is kind of crazy to think. But like mod chips have been around forever, you know, but like, again, mod chips are not necessarily the most casual thing in the world. You do have to find someone who knows how to solder. Ryan Davis installed a PS1 mod chip for me once because I was way too afraid to fucking solder anything. But you know, you could also just buy consoles. Like NCS was selling modded PS2s, and they were also selling Japanese games. And so it was this thing of like, well, yeah, if you send us your PS2, we'll put a mod chip in it, and then you can play these Japanese games that we're selling. Or you could just buy a pre-modded one from us. At a time when Sony did not have enough official debug consoles to meet our needs as reviewers, we bought 5 modded PS2s from NCS because it worked the exact same way as a debug. It just, you put in a burn disk and it boots, and so you know it's the exact same thing that a debug console that did. And so yeah, you know, it was very useful. But I don't know, like it's obviously a very like you know long-winded discussion that we could continue to have about piracy for the rest of our lives. But I feel like we've been having versions of this conversation for decades, and they always go the same way. And I think that the same thing applies to the movie business and the music industry and television and everything else. I think a lot of it is I think it's probably okay and perhaps good business on their part to try to stop casual piracy. When it gets too easy, when it becomes easier for people to steal your television show than it is to watch it through legitimate means, you have probably fucked up. You know what I mean? When it's easier for you to get your hands on a movie by clicking 3 buttons on a website than it is to figure out like who's selling it. Like I go to Amazon and this, and like, you know, like maybe you're in those ecosystems and whatever, and it's easier for you to buy the movie, and maybe it's not. Streaming services, now that there's 9,000 of them, are you really going to subscribe to all of them? Or are you going to subscribe to one of them? And then when you hear like, oh, there's a show on Apple TV you care about, are you going to go sign up for Apple TV for a month, or are you going to just steal it? There's a lot of considerations around that, ethical and otherwise. But they're once again creating a scenario where it's a hassle of like, okay, I need to get this and do this, and like, what I need to sign up for this thing, and then I forgot to cancel it, and then I took a charge for this, and you know that like casual piracy feels like it's on the rise, at least when it comes to, you know, TV and movies and some of that stuff. Like it feels like it's on the verge of becoming too easy, and that's when people clamp down. It's not when it's like installing kernel level drivers and, oh, you got to jump through 9,000 hoops to do this. It's when it's like, I can click a button and have this television show. That's when I think people start to go like, oh shit. Or I can click a button and this video game's just here. Yeah, that's not good. And so as that stuff gets easier, that is when you will start to see pushback. That's when you start to see, I mean, in some cases, you see very outsized pushback. You see like, okay, we're trying to pass government legislation that makes it so you have to give up, the ISP needs to give up these users here because they did this and downloaded this, and we need to make sure we can prosecute these people. You know, there was the period of time there where the music industry was like trying to sue people who downloaded MP3s, not even people who uploaded MP3s, but people who downloaded them. And how'd that go? Not great. Not great. And I think video games are not immune to that. It is a somewhat different situation because I don't think any of that is quite as easy as just like, here's some MKVs, bro. Like that's, you know, but But that stuff is as easy, like, you know, back in the VHS days, it was very easy to copy tapes. It was very easy to rent tapes and copy them and have them. And they tried to come up with copy protection that would make the tapes look all red and fucked up. Macro vision. But some VCRs just didn't respond to the macro vision protection stuff. And so you could just copy them anyway. And so it just, I don't know, man. It's a whole fucking thing. And it always has been. And it always will be. Let's get into some emails here. Podcast@guard.bike is the email address for you to send to me. Paul in LA writes in and says, I recently took the DualSense Edge plunge. In anticipation of the inevitable stick drift, I've begun to look at modded sticks that might prevent this from happening. Many of these are on modding sites. Are these legit? Is there a consensus on a go-to place for purchasing these things that I'm not aware of? I have almost, so the thing about replacing the sticks on a DualSense Edge with like weird unofficial sticks, because it is modular. You can actually just pop this, the front of a DualSense Edge comes off, these stick modules just come right out, and you can buy new ones from Sony for it's like $40. I think it's $40 each. I forget, but it was not. I replaced these. These are relatively new sticks that I bought from Sony because one of them was starting to drift, which is stupid. The problem here is that they shouldn't drift in the first place. It's a $200 controller. The idea that they made the sticks replaceable is interesting, but the idea that they need to be replaced is a problem. You can't replace the battery on a DualSense Edge, but you can replace the sticks. What the fuck are we doing? It's a $200 controller. Anyway, it's also my favorite controller. It's a problem. But you can go and buy modded stick modules that have like TMR sticks or kind of other modules in them. My understanding with that is that, so like you have to calibrate the sticks or whatever. And there's calibration stuff that if you are soldering TMR sticks onto a regular DualSense, that's not a problem. But I've been afraid to take the plunge on TMRs for an Edge because I heard that there was some weird stuff with calibration, or that you cannot calibrate it directly from the controller itself. And so there's like a process to doing it. And maybe if you're buying the stick modules, that's not a big deal. It's weird to me that Sony has not made official better stick modules for this thing, which would be an even crazier, like, hey, it's $200 for this controller. And if you want to replace the sticks with TMRs, you can buy 2 TMR stick modules for this amount of money. Like, that seems crazy. I need to replace a regular DualSense controller that the kids have been using because the left stick will occasionally get stuck pushing left. And we started playing Crash Bandicoot 4 here in the home, and that's got some 2D-ish levels where you are pushing to the right all the time. And sometimes while you are pushing all the way to the right, it will still push to the left. It's fucking broken, and it has been for a while. Also, Crash Bandicoot 4 is a bad video game. Some of the level design in that game is mind-blowingly bad in terms of like the 3D, like they're the platforming they're asking you to do. And like they give you a power-up that lets you do this big slow double jump, and you're spinning like the Tasmanian devil the entire time while you're doing it. And they want you to make these weird diagonal jumps that are just and it's like they had to draw a shadow on the ground and then draw a circle around the shadow so you wouldn't miss it because they knew the game they were making was fucking bad. And they're like, I don't know, keep drawing rings under the shadow. Maybe that will make it easier to make these terrible jumps. Mind-blowing. That video game. And my son won't stop playing it. It's my fault because I'm going through the list of games that I own and going like, what would be a game that maybe he could play some of, like platformer, like not super difficult, like is there something? And I saw Crash Bandicoot 4 on the list and said, maybe he'll be into this. And he is. But that just means that I have to play a lot of Crash Bandicoot 4 because he's 4 and he's okay at it. But there's a lot of levels that he just can't finish. And now I have to play Crash Bandicoot 4. And now I get to experience the magic of that level design for myself. It is poor in many cases. Anyway, you've reminded me that these exist, and now I kind of want to, I know there are a handful of shops. I am not experienced in purchasing modded DualSense Edge sticks, but I very nearly did when it came time to replace them, and I ended up just buying replacement regular sticks. I'm looking at a website that I've never heard of before that I just Googled, and I'm not even going to say the name of it because I don't want people to just Google it. You'll find websites that are selling TMR stick modules for the DualSense Edge. This place, they are selling them for $61.25 a piece. You need 2 of them. I mean, I guess you don't need 2 of them, but you should get 2 of them. And, they do have a 20% off sale. They do have a 20% off sale right now. But also, I have no idea if this is even a real company. It is a store that's in Texas, so they at least have a physical location that if you don't want it shipped, you can go pick it up in Texas. And then you can find like all manner of these on whether it's AliExpress or some of these other places. But some of those you'll just find raw TMR modules that you need to solder in yourself, and I'm just not going to do that. Again, I don't trust myself. I don't know how to do that. But my answer is that this sounds like something that would be awesome. Getting a good Hall effect or TMR stick for your DualSense Edge, and you would solve that problem once and for all. But I don't know if any of that stuff is super legit or not. I know the parts have been available for a long time, and so I do not doubt that whether it's Ghoulie Kit or some of these other companies that are making the TMR modules that you could install into a DualSense Edge stick module, like that's definitely a thing. But any of these companies selling pre-made ones, I don't know I don't actually know. And so my advice would be careful when it comes to that stuff. Though this place does have a physical address and phone number in Texas. That actually, weirdly enough, gives me kind of a, maybe I would order from them. I don't know. Adam in Philadelphia writes in and says, I remember you fondly talking about Quake 3 Arena on Dreamcast with mouse and keyboard and absolutely destroying those kids. I have a similar story. I found the Dreamcast servers as a PC player back then and only ran into 1 or 2 others that had the same skill as me. I assume they were also on PC. Do you play any console games nowadays with official mouse and keyboard support? No. I for the same reason I want to get a Steam controller for this I just don't have a place to put a mouse and keyboard in front of a TV. I guess I could get a TV tray or something like that and try to do it, but no. No, I am not currently doing any of that in any console games. But yes, they had cross-play support for like a very brief window for Quake on the Dreamcast, and it was like they tried to make kind of a big deal about this before the game was out. When they were putting out Quake on the Dreamcast, they said, and it'll connect to the PC, and so you can play with PC players and you can connect to those servers and all of this stuff. And then I want to say it maybe wasn't even like a week after the release of Quake on the Dreamcast that they patched Quake 3 on PC and broke compatibility because they could not patch the Quake version of Dreamcast to match. And so for a while there, you could go and run old Quake 3 servers on PC, specifically if you wanted to have the Dreamcast audience be able to play, but no one was fucking doing that. And so there was a handful of servers as a Quake 3 Dreamcast player that you could play. Some of them that Sega was running themselves, and you know, but whatever, right? But it would hit the same master server that the real versions of Quake would hit, but it just didn't. You know, you just couldn't do that. It's frustrating in some ways. I wonder, you know, maybe the size would have been too much for it, but you know, there were cases where games got downloadable updates onto the VMU. I wonder if there ever could have been a world where they patched Quake on the Dreamcast. Probably not. Otherwise, they probably would have done it. But yeah, that was a very frustrating thing, and like a very big shot at the game. Like it happened. I remember it happening so fast that it almost seemed vindictive, which is weird because id, you know, like was supporting that version of the game to a certain degree. That like they broke that cross-platform functionality like almost immediately. You're just like, oh, okay, I guess that's the end of that. That was a neat idea for 5 minutes, and then it was gone. And so yeah, it's frustrating. But no, the question is, do I play any console games with mouse and keyboard support? I do not. I am not especially interested in that, and I would just play it on PC. So like, it's just not a. I feel like most of the games that have that support are also cross-platform multiplayer games. And so you are encountering PC players with a mouse and keyboard in some other scenarios anyway. So I wouldn't go through the hassle of hooking a mouse and keyboard up to a PlayStation just to do that. But it was an interesting kind of idea that the handful of times it did happen, like in the earlier days, it was like what? Unreal Tournament 3, I want to say. Well, Unreal Tournament 3 on PlayStation 3 had like mod support. Like you could cook mods for the PS3 version of the game, and that was fucking wild. For all the reasons we were just talking about with custom firmware and all the potential attack vectors and everything else, the idea that you could just install mods into a version of the game like that seemed like a very un-Sony thing to allow. For obvious reasons, but I don't know that that ever became a real attack vector. I don't know that anyone ever crafted a malformed Unreal Tournament 3 mod that could be used to, you know, crack a PS3 or anything like that. I thought for sure something like that would happen, but I guess they had already cracked it in so many other ways they never bothered. Andrew writes in and asks this question about supporting video games. He says, I bought Marathon before it came out, loved everything about the aesthetic and didn't care if it bombed. I wanted to support the game. The game is, as you know, absolutely amazing. I'm also one of the sickos that loves Arc Raiders. For me, it is amazing as well. My kids and I sink a lot of time into Arc Raiders, and I find myself panicking over not playing Marathon because purchase alone seems to no longer be enough to support games. I have 52 hours in Marathon and wish I could be two people playing both games at the same time. In today's gaming industry environment, how do we show support for a game in which attention economy is king? I love all these games and want more of everything they have to offer, but only have so many hours. I think this is something that you need to let go of, is probably my actual answer to these questions. Like, there's only so much you can do as a person. It is not your job to keep these companies afloat. If these games are running in such a frail form that you playing Arc Raiders over Marathon causes Marathon to fail, then Marathon was going to fail anyway. or vice versa, you know, like whatever. Like, and I think that goes for just about any game, any kind of online game. Like, you can't be expected to prop up the player base yourself. That no one person can do that. Even most people that have audiences, you know, like that's not enough. Like if I was out there and trying to say Conquered is the most amazing game ever made and you need to play it immediately, they still would have shut that game down. I don't know how big of an audience you would need to have in order to like make a swing there that keeps a game afloat. But I don't know that anyone streaming today has that level of sway over their audience to be able to do that, especially on a regular basis. You might see a one-off situation of just like, this month we're going to, and all you're doing is delaying it a month. We need to go all buy Conquered and play it all month long in order to keep this game alive. Let's say, someone said. If you have Conquered month with your streaming audience and then the month ends and you all move on, that almost looks worse. Oh, this game's doing great. Ba-dum, ba-dum, done. Oh God, what happened? Yeah, I think that, you know, there's something to be said. When I think about buying games in ways that are like supportive, it's much smaller games from much smaller teams. Things you can do that help a game. The things we hear more recently about things that actually help developers and help games get in front of more people are actually things like writing Steam reviews. Wishlisting a game prior to release, obviously, is a big deal on Steam. Like algorithmically, if a game gets above a certain wish list count and whatever, they have a sort of math equation that they can apply to that, where they go, oh, we think it's going to sell this many copies. Based on the number of wish lists, it should sell in this range. Like that's become not wholly predictable, but to an extent, they can go, oh, okay, we think wish lists mean it will sell this and appeal to these people and this and that. And so it kind of goes that way. And so I look at that and that stuff. Like I don't write a ton of Steam reviews. I've written more over the last couple of years than I probably ever have before. But you know, not necessarily a ton of them. But there are definitely cases where like that's a thing you hear about. That's a thing you hear about from the developers themselves. Is like, hey, especially smaller ones that don't get a lot of Steam reviews, there is a threshold where once a game gets X number of Steam reviews and they're positive, I think, ideally, then I think it might be 100 reviews or something, but I think once it crosses a certain threshold, it sort of becomes eligible for placement in different areas around the Steam interface that helps it get exposed to more people. And so my advice, if you want to do things like that, and again, I like Marathon a lot. I think that is one of the coolest games I've played all year. It might be the best game I've played thus far this year, for whatever, it's April, whatever, who cares? But point being, I love that fucking game. Ultimately, Bungie is owned by Sony. They are not a small-time strappy studio, you know, like if Sony wants to make a strategic change, they will do it. I don't care how many of your friends and how many hours you have in Marathon, Sony's going to make that change. And I don't think that any one of us has like the sway in any of the levers we can pull, Steam reviews, whatever else, to like stave off something like that in the grand scheme of things. But that would be my advice, is to, you know, like I think that, you know, word of mouth is one of the best ways that people hear about games these days. I think Marathon, in a weird way, like there has been some kind of like almost campaign, like there's a weird thing where people are shitting on Marathon without having played it, or just like people are weird about Marathon for whatever reason. And so I think that like because there is this weird undercurrent of people like trying to shit on Marathon for reasons that I don't think line up with what that game actually is, I think, you know, being there with a word of mouth that says this game's actually fucking awesome, this game's fucking cool as shit, I think is interesting, because you do, and I you know, as someone who does like that game and talks about it here and there, I find that there are people who go like, wow, I didn't realize that Marathon was fucking this or that, or like, because they're only hearing like weird shit about the game. It seems like that there's an audience of people out there that just like, I don't even know if they play games at all, or if they're just trying to make controversial content about video games because they think that that will lead to like, you know, Twitter pays people based on engagement, so people just write the wildest shit possible to try to rile up people, and you know, YouTube is not far behind on that kind of mentality. And so is it people like that? Like maybe it seems like it is sometimes. Some of this has died off because Marathon is not like a brand new game anymore, but like there was for a while there just like a lot of people just being really fucking weird about Marathon. And so in this specific case, like, yeah, I don't know, man, word of mouth, write a Steam review, or I guess on PlayStation, you know, write reviews, rank a game, whatever, and pull those levers when you can. And I would say do that. And I would say do that for the games you like, especially the smaller ones, because I think that that's, you know, if you like a game and want to see more of that developer's work or whatever, like those are the sorts of things you can kind of do to help get that game in front of more people. And that's something, again, that you hear directly from developers themselves. And so I would take that at face value and say that that is a thing you can do. But you can't sit there and go like, I'm not playing enough Marathon, and when it gets shut down, it's going to be my fault. Like that's an industry-wide problem. It's beyond any one of us. That when a good game gets shut down, like that's a bad problem. Conquer got shut down because it probably should not have shipped in the first place. And I think if there had been, if there had been more internal conversation about the quality of that game, it probably would not have shipped. And so it's a unique scenario that does not apply to the vast majority of other games. If that makes any sense. So yeah, I appreciate the sentiment, because there's definitely like, I'm a person who bought every version of Titanfall 2, and I think I bought every piece of DLC that they put out for every version of that game. You know? I got so much double XP in that game, I went and bought more fucking cans of a soda to get that, like, you know, like, believe me, I've been there. I had a friend who would buy copies of Psychonauts for people as gifts, not necessarily for like their birthday or anything, but like she just kept buying copies of Psychonauts because she felt she needed to buy copies of Psychonauts for people so that they would play it. So I don't know, buy copies of Marathon for everyone you know. in conclusion, buy everyone a copy of Marathon. Sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes you need to do that with a multiplayer game. Sometimes you need to like take matters into your own hands and say, my friends are dragging their feet on buying this game so we can play together. So fuck them. I'm buying them all copies of these goddamn games so that I can guilt them into playing this game with me. Alma in the chat asks, what's the game I spent the most money on? It's it's Mark of the Wolves for the Neo Geo. You know, Like that game was, I spent $1,100 on that. And then the price of it went up. And so it was worth $1,400 for a while. I think the price has since come back down. I think it is still above what I paid for it all those years ago. But yeah, I bought a used copy of Mark of the Wolves in Japan for, the yen equivalent of $1,100. And fucking money well spent, man. And then it came out of the Dreamcast like not long after that, and I was like, shit. And I was kind of like, man, I didn't need to spend that money. But no, I did need to spend that money because I want the fucking big, chunky, fucking crazy cartridge. I want this thing that says Wharves on it. Like, the big physical specimen of this big fucking car. Like, the thing about getting Neo Geo games is that they feel expensive because they're massive. And when you fucking look at them, you go like, look at this. It's like this big fucking clamshell plastic case. This big, like the snaps on it. Like, it feels like you bought a fucking weapon. And it's awesome. So yeah, that's probably the most I've spent on a single video. That is definitely the most I have spent on a single video game. I'm trying to think because I've dealt in arcade cabinets over the years here and there, but I don't think any of the full cabinets ever cost that much money. Yeah, I don't think I've spent that kind of money on any individual cabinets or whatever. But yeah, that is the most expensive game I have purchased. It is not the most expensive game I own. But it's a sickness. Like it was part of and collecting Neo Geo games is fucked. And it has been for years. For absolute years. But there was a time there was a brief period of time there where like it hadn't gone fully crazy across the board. And now, eBay is rotten with Neo Geo carts, but so many of them are probably bootlegs. And so collecting Neo Geo stuff just feels like a fucking minefield. But when you combine my desire to get into getting some Neo Geo games with the reality of spending 2 or 3 weeks every year in Japan for about a 5-year stretch, eventually you have purchased all of the cheap stuff. And that's exactly how it happened. I would buy any Neo Geo game that was under $30. Because you're just like, well, fuck it, I'm here. Like, I'm at this store right now. I'm fucking standing in this store in Akihabara looking at this fucking cartridge, and it's like fucking like when I do the math in my head, I'm like, all right, that's like $18. Like, why would I not buy this Neo Geo game for fucking $18? I bought like 5 copies of Samurai Showdown 2 because they were like fucking $4. And so one year I bought every copy of Samurai Showdown 2 I saw because I'm like, this is one of the greatest goddamn games of all time. And what the fuck? Why would they sell it for this amount of, like, this is stupid. And I brought them, I gave them out as gifts in some cases to people who did not even own a Neo Geo, but like I had a crew of people at the movie theater that were all big Samurai Showdown 2 fans. And I gave one of them one of the cartridges I got. I said, here, man, and go put this on your shelf or something, or go buy a fucking Neo Geo while they're still inexpensive-ish. But eventually you have purchased every cheap game. And all that's left are like all these fucking Metal Slug games and fucking all, and eventually like SNK versus Capcom and the latter day King of Fighters. And fucking Mark of the Wolves, and you eventually start to think like, okay, well, if I'm gonna buy any more Neo Geo games, they're gonna get me now because I got all the cheap ones. And Mark of the Wolves, I think, was one of the last Neo Geo games I purchased. At least for the home console stuff. I, got into MVS stuff a little bit later than that. I was standing in, like, we had just seen another Mark of the Wolves cartridge, like, at a store up the street for like $400 more. And it was a copy that was like in better condition than that one and cheaper. And like, that's a combo that I look at and just go like, yep, okay, yeah, all right, here. I'm going to buy, yes. I'm going to like give you all this yen in my wallet because you might not take the credit card. I don't know for sure. And then I'm going to walk out of here with this goddamn video game and it's going to be the best. And it was the best. Oh, before that I had spent, probably like $100 or $200 on like some King of Fighters games or $300 here and there, which that's all kind of, at some point, if you're in this Neo Geo thing, that's not that much money. At some point you're like, well, I mean, that's how much money those carts cost originally when they first came out. So the idea that I'm spending $300 on the Neo Geo game is basically like zero. It's basically like it's an even number. I would just set aside a set amount of money, and like, it was like I was going gambling. It was like, okay, we're going to Japan. I'm going to get this amount of money and I'm going to spend it while I'm there. I'm going to do the best I can with this, and it, like $3,000 or whatever. And then I would get home and immediately start saving up for the next one. I was like, okay, I'm not buying anything else because I know fucking, TGS is 3 months away or whatever it is. And so I've got to set aside some money. Let's see. Alroy writes in and says, your journey through the Codemasters cartridges in the NES ranking series has me curious about your thoughts on the Game Genie, as well as your opinion on cheat devices in general. I think video games peaked for me when I used an action replay to play as a single coin in Super Mario 64 DS, a truly badass experience. I think the Game Genie is really fucking cool. I think the action replay was always cooler, because it was, you could, if you were well equipped, and I eventually got all the cabling and everything that I needed to make my own codes on the action replay for the PlayStation. You could get a parallel port cable and hook it up to a card in your PC and then run the cheat making software on the PC and basically poke at a PlayStation's RAM from a distance. And it was fucking neat. Yeah, I don't know. The Game Genie was cool, but like, it felt limited to me. And I eventually got an action replay for the Genesis, and the Genesis action replay, which those devices, the action replay devices, would eventually, I think, largely come to be known as the Game Shark, at least in the PlayStation era. But the action replay for the Genesis had a code creator built in, where you could, like, in the middle of a game, flip a switch and it would take you to the code interface, and you could mess around with RAM right there and narrow down, do your cheat search to narrow it down, and eventually kind of make your own codes. And it was fucking cool. The ability to make your own codes, to me, is the thing that made those devices awesome. The Game Genie model of, like, the Game Genie thing was like twofold. One, the Game Genie, you were like modifying ROM instead of RAM. And so, like, the concept is more like, on the Game Genie, you were changing the routine that lowered the number of lives to, instead of lowering it 1 every time you died, it lowered it none. Whereas on the RAM side of things, you're setting a watch that watches an address, and if this address changes from the 3 lives to 2 lives, the action replay says, nope, it's 3, and it pokes a 3 back into that location. So you'll see it go from 3 to 2 and then back to 3 real quick as it kind of does its thing. I prefer the RAM side of things because it's a lot easier with things with numbers and all of that. But on the Game Genie side for the NES, you had all these stupid codes like Mario jumps fucking super high and it's mad broken and changes the color palette and does this. And Like there's just a lot of really weird stuff with that. Yeah, the Game Genie was cool, but again, you needed to get like subscribe to code updates in the mail, and the internet wasn't a thing yet, and so you just weren't finding Game Genie codes the way that you wanted to. In some cases, you had games that you didn't have the codes for because they were either obscure games that were never going to be in the official updates that they mailed out, or the update mails, I think, were they monthly? They might have been like quarterly or something. And so it just sort of, I don't know, like that stuff was that side of it was kind of a hassle. Let's see. What is next? Michael from New York City writes in and asks, what happened to Call of Duty on Switch? Didn't Microsoft sign one of their many 10-year deals to put Call of Duty on Nintendo platforms almost 3 years ago? Correct me if I'm wrong, but have we seen any Call of Duty games on Nintendo platforms since? What do you think is going on there? I think that there's no government heat around them for the sale of that company anymore, and I think that is probably something of a factor here. But it is something that they have explored recently, and I don't know if there's like plans in motion, but there's stuff that Call of Duty does, and I've talked a little bit about this before, but there's stuff that Call of Duty does in terms of requiring an online server connection and like downloading textures in the background, and what have you, that are like weird, that are not things that a lot of other games do. And so my gut feeling on this is that despite it seeming like a very simple, like, oh, it's first-person shooter, what are you going to do? That there actually is a lot of technical consideration to be made around how you get those systems up and running on a Switch 2, which is a platform that is often online, but not always online. And so I think there's a number of technical considerations that they probably have to figure out in order to get that game up and running on a Switch 2. And that stuff takes time. And so I know it is something that they have investigated. I don't know what the current status is. Like, you know, gut feeling is like, it seems like that should happen this year, right? Like they've had enough years to like engineer it at this point, because it's been like you said, it was like 3 years or whatever it's been. Like it feels like it would take a good chunk of time to figure out what the problems are and engineer a solution to them. And then what do you do? I think the other problem, which is also a technical one, I suppose, is those games are really big. Those games are extremely large to install. And so how do you know, and they receive large updates on a relatively regular basis. And so, you know, there is sort of a situation there of just like, do you need to break the game up in different ways to make it something that is storable on a default Switch 2 with no storage upgrade? Do you need to, do you need to break the game's modes apart into different things that you can install and uninstall, which is something they sort of do on existing platforms. But do they need to do more of that to make it even easier to have a smaller install size? That's probably something they at least need to have a conversation about, if not think about ways to engineer better solutions for it. And so I think the specifics of the Switch 2 being a handheld and all of that, I think all of that factors into why we haven't seen anything happen yet. But I don't know. I don't know what will happen at this point. Like, you know, if that, my assumption, which is maybe dumb, but my assumption is that there will eventually come a year where they go, oh, by the way, it's coming to, it's coming to Switch. It's coming to Switch 2. What do they do for iOS stuff? The iOS stuff is different. Like Warzone is there, but not the full game. And so or they just shut, they had multiple different apps for Call of Duty multiplayer. And like there's a Warzone app, and there was a separate free-to-play multiplayer game that was like reusing maps from Call of Duty, but had its own cursed monetization. And it was a super fucking weird thing. And I don't know which ones still exist and don't, because they shut one of them down relatively recently, but I don't remember which one. But yeah, I know that it's not as easy as just like adding it to a list and going, now it's on Switch too. And it's not necessarily as easy because, you know, even though they do a PlayStation 4 version of that game still, which I'm sure helps to a certain degree, it is not as simple as just like, okay, we're just throwing it on here and here you go. Like there's quite a bit more work that they would need to do to just in the engineering end. More so than even just the port, you know, because obviously you have to port it to that architecture and everything else. But like, I think there's, again, you know, that game uses your internet connection in some strange ways that, or in ways that a lot of other games don't when it comes to texture streaming and everything else. And so I think there's just shit they got to figure out. You know what I mean? Ian asks about Humongous Entertainment and their focus on kid-friendly computer games in the 90s. Do you have any specific memories of these? For those of us who were kids in the 90s, their computer games were massive $20 point-and-click adventure games and sports games that worked on almost any Windows 95 computer. Shout out to Pajama Sam. The only Humongous Entertainment games I care about are Fatty Bear's Fun Pack and like the putt equivalent of that. I guess is it just Putt's Fun Pack or whatever? But I want to play Othello against Fatty Bear. And that's about it, man. I don't know anything about Freddy Fish or Pajama Sam or any of that stuff. Those games came out on 3DO. They were like early 90s CD-ROMs. Fatty Bear's a bad motherfucker, man. And Putt. Can't trust him. High as hell. 24/7. What did I do here? Okay, sorry. I played a weird amount of Fatty Bear's Fun Pack. I had a couple of friends that we were all too old for it, but we ended up playing a lot of Go Fish against Fatty Bear. We would walk around doing Fatty Bear impressions because it was just like such a dumb thing. Alex in Australia writes in with finally some important questions. Who is Ken Kniff? Jeff, for some reason the name Ken Kniff recently bored its way back into my head decades after I stopped listening to Eminem. I never knew who Ken was or why Slim hated him. I could just Google it, but instead I'm asking you. Ken Kniff from Connecticut. So Ken Kniff was originally a prank phone call where I believe he was a local Detroit rapper. His name is Aristotle, if I remember right. And he is the original Ken Kniff. And he called up Eminem and like they put that prank call on the album. And then there was some falling out between those guys, but then Eminem started doing the Ken Kniff voice. And so everything after the first record, the first Eminem record, is like Eminem doing the Ken Kniff voice. And there's like a mixtape that he put out that had a bunch of skits on it. There was a precursor to his second album where he's calling up like Fat Beats Records and stuff and pretending to be Ken Kniff and all this other stupid shit. But that's Eminem doing that. That's not Aristotle. Aristotle, the original Ken Kniff, would eventually put out an album called The Ken Kniff Show. And he put out his own record as the character. And I think he's on, like, there's like a skit on the Mad Rappers album, and I think he's on there as well, or he's on one of the tracks on the Mad Rappers record. While we're talking about now the Mad Rapper. Now we're talking. Tell him why you mad, son. And so, yeah, there was a change in the character, you know, like at some point, I think Eminem would use the Ken Kniff voice when, like, doing his Insane Clown Posse diss track. And it became much like a lot of things about Eminem, particularly in that era, but still, like, the Ken Kniff thing took a turn to become, like, extremely extra next level homophobic. Like, it started here, and then when Eminem started doing the voice, it kind of went up here on that scale. Just to give you some context for all of this fucking stupid shit. Again, you shouldn't you shouldn't see a Jackass movie in the fucking theaters. You should see these on bad fucking tapes. Eminem record, these are not meant to be discussed on podcasts. It's shit from a different time that you just look at and go like, yeah, that motherfucker can rap though. And then you move on. Eric in Northbrook writes in and says, with the benefit of hindsight, were QTEs a mistake? No. QuickTime events are not a mistake. I think there are a lot of bad places to deploy QuickTime events, and I think that building an entire game around them is often foolish, because that's how you get Dragon's Lair, and we don't need that. But when it comes to well-timed button presses or mashing buttons even, I think that, like, if you use them well and in the right way at the right time, and by that I mean sparingly, they can be surprising. And they can kind of simulate just about anything, like things that, like, you wouldn't do in a full moving video game because they're weird things. If you want to have an animation that plays out and you know, you come up with two ways for it to go right or wrong based on how well you hit the button or mashed it or whatever, I think there's a lot of things you can simulate. There's a lot of exertion that you can simulate by mashing a button. QuickTime events in the timing way, you know, like, I think, like, that's, yeah, you can have those uses. But if we expand that to include, let's say, like MGS4, when you're, yes, exactly, when you're crawling through that fucking corridor as your suit explodes and you're mashing that fucking button to survive, like, that's good. That's very good. Like, that's a really great way to deploy a very simple fucking, like, button mashing kind of thing in a way that is both effective and intensifies the situation. But if you work QTEs into just, like, raw gameplay where you're just, like, walking and then suddenly it happens because you're using a QTE to kind of, like, parry an attack or something like that, I think that's a weird way to do it. I think Die Hard Arcade does it pretty well, where it's like you clear a scenario and then you want to get to the next room, and so it cuts to an action sequence of you running, and then as you're running, there's a guy there and it says you should hit the kick button, and if you hit the kick button, you kick that motherfucker and he's dead, and then when you launch into the next action sequence, that guy is still dead and there's one less guy for you to fight. But if you hit the wrong button, he does a clothesline, knocks you over, you start the next action sequence laid out, and then you got to stand up and fight everybody. I think the way Die Hard Arcade does QTEs is super fucking neat. And so, yeah, I think that, like, nowadays, what's the most recent game that has, like, a lot of QTEs in it? I don't know. Like, modern gaming, I feel like at some point QTEs were really good because there was just a lot of animation, a lot of stuff that was very hard to do in-game, in-engine, whatever. And now, yes, the mind's eye CPR QuickTime event. Yeah, now we're fucking talking. But God. But yeah, I think that's something that as the fidelity of graphics just gets better in a general sense, like maybe the need for QTEs is not quite as extreme. But the QuickTime event, nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it as a concept. It's merely how it's used. I don't want to always do it in the middle of like a boss battle. I don't think that that's always a great way to deploy it unless the animation and all of the other stuff is so over the top that you're like, I got to mash this button while I watch this cool shit happen. Like, I think that can work, but when you rely on it too much, of like, oh, this giant's got a big steel girder and he's trying to fucking smash it into my face and I have super spider fucking power and I need to push it off of him by mashing this button. Like, I think sometimes that stuff, they can lean on it a little too hard, and I think that it overstays its welcome. Joe from New York writes in and says, why does everyone seem to think that Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be the greatest game ever made that's going to save the entire industry? It all seems really overblown, especially since I have a feeling it's going to play a lot more like Red Dead 2 than it will GTA 5, and that game is almost too immersive already. I predict it now that GTA 6 is going to be loved by sickos who liked Red Dead 2, hated by people who like GTA 5, and the GTA Online people will just go back to GTA 5 Online. When is Bully 2 Kevin's Back Jack coming out? Finally, the question we care about. I think I think you are underestimating Rockstar's awareness of the differences between Red Dead 2 and GTA and the different needs that those games have and the different audiences those games can speak to. When you say it'll be just like Red Dead 2, I doubt it. But to your point, why does everyone seem to think it'll be the greatest game that ever made and then it's going to save the industry? I don't know that I don't really see a lot of like it's going to be the greatest game ever made. I think people are pretty realistic about it. But I do see it could be one of the biggest games ever made, right? And it's not going to save the video game industry. If anything, it's going to funnel a bunch of money away from other developers at a time when things have been very hard for a lot of years. And regardless of if they were trying to ship a game in that window or not, it's going to take up a lot of oxygen and dollars, more importantly. When it comes to saving the industry or whatever, like, that's a number. Like, if you're looking at how much money did the video game industry make this year, and was it more than last year? GTA 6 is big enough that it moves the needle on that a bit, probably. And as an industry-wide thing, you go, oh, huh. But, like, the more direct thing it can help with is really just that it'll sell some fucking PlayStation 5s and probably some Xboxes as well. Like, it'll be the thing that people will finally go, oh shit, I need to buy a fucking PlayStation. You know? And so you will see that. And the knock-on effects of that could be that those players buy GTA and never buy another game again. Or they buy GTA and then, since they have the console, when they're done with GTA 5 and they don't get sucked into the online mode for one reason or another, they go and buy a different game. And maybe they buy another game after that and another game after that. And so that does matter. That does have some kind of knock-on effect eventually. But as far as, like, you know, turning things around for a you know, sometimes stagnant market that is, you know, that is only getting more expensive, I think that sometimes gets a little bit overblown. Rackham Frackham says, but PlayStation 5s are like $900 now, aren't they? It's like, no, I mean, what, the pros are $900, right? What's the regular PS5 is only like $600. It's a deal. I think that GTA is a big enough deal that you will find people that will find a way to buy a PlayStation. It won't be as many people as would be able to do that if the consoles were still less money, but I think it will be enough of them that they will definitely see a bump in sales. what people will have to go through to save money up for a PlayStation 5 like that. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's fucking selling plasma, going to fucking sperm banks. I don't know. Sold my car to get a PlayStation 5. Yeah, I don't know. Like these are fucking bad times. It's a really bad time to fucking ship a fucking game that makes people want to buy a console in some ways, right? Yes, Klarna. Yeah, people buying PS5s on layaway. Yes, people starting up an OnlyFans so they can buy a PS5. Yeah, I don't know. This is all terrible. The idea that we even can joke about this is awful. Let's see. Cody in Orange County asks, this is kind of like, I think the question that everyone is asking in different forms. He sent this in 2 weeks ago, so this is a little bit older. But last week, the Lenovo Legion Go 2 just about doubled in price. In January, the 2 terabyte Z2 Extreme version was listed at $1,479.99. Now Lenovo is listing it at $2,849.99. I am unsure who in their right mind is paying a price like this for a handheld gaming device. There are other handhelds that are out of stock or canceled altogether. Why does it seem like handheld PC prices are more volatile than console prices? Is it because they move few units when compared to consoles? Is the 25 to 50% price increase on consoles actually a kindness when the alternative could be either doubling the price or restricting production to the point where consoles sell out again? This is the worst timeline. Yeah. So, the Lenovo Legion Go 2 is a much lower volume device in terms of how many they sell in a given time frame. Also, I think, that probably results in them not manufacturing as many. When they go and run off a line of, like a PlayStation 5s, like they bought all that RAM a while ago, right? Or until now. And they will eventually suffer from this. But because they deal in such bulk, they negotiated some of that pricing a long time ago, and they get manufactured for that price, and that's that. Eventually, yesterday's price is not today's price, and then that's when they raise the price on the console, because they're like, oh, we want to make more of these, but we can't make them for the price we used to make them for, and so it goes up. For a Lenovo Legion Go 2, where who knows how many of those they make in a month? 0? Because they made them all already? Like, I don't know. Like, are they, do they make 100 of them? Do they make 1,000 of them? Do they make 10,000 of them? I don't know how many people are buying those, especially after raising the prices. Like they're responding to the market and the world in which they're making these things in. Like it's not necessarily purely just like Lenovo going, oh, I bet we can sucker people into paying nearly $3,000 for one of these things. They don't want to do that. Like no one wants to buy a thing like that for that kind of price. Like that's crazy. The $1,400 I think was too much. And so like they're just as stuck as everyone. They're like, okay, well shit, we can't make these for any cheaper than that because we're gonna lose money on them if we do. But also, no one's gonna buy them if we make them because they're too expensive. So, oh shit, they're just kind of fucked, right? If they could sell them for cheaper, they would, because that's a crazy number. That's like no one should buy a handheld PC for $3 fucking grand. That's dumb. Go buy yourself a real fucking laptop at those kind of prices. Go find yourself but those will go up in price too if they haven't already. Like, everything is going to be affected by that one way or the other. It's just a matter of if you found that market before the price increase or after. Let's see. We can take like one more quick one here. Is Pragmata the new Banjo-Kazooie? I'm only joking around. Rob from Detroit, but I'm living in Sydney. Yes. Pragmata is the new Banjo-Kazooie. It is Bird and Bear all over again. You thought it was Mega Man. No. You should be able to get a backpack for Hugh and have Diana pop out of the backpack and go, that would be interesting. Notice I didn't say good. That's going to do it. Be back tomorrow to play some video games and hang out. So come on back tomorrow. Thanks everybody for listening. Head over to jeff.zone if you want an ad-free version of the show, or you want to read what I wrote about Saros or any of these other topics. See some videos, do some things. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.